Coming up on Bloomberg this weekend, strikes on hold. President Trump reverses course overnight, calling off a major escalation with Iran and promising a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Will that bring down the price of oil and gas?
More of our exclusive interview with 4 of the nation's governors. Their thoughts on affordability, elections, and the rapid growth of AI.
Data centers and AI at some level is a national economic and security imperative. We cannot let China win on this one.
And speaking of AI, the digital divide, how the use of ChatGPT and other AI agents is impacting our human relationships and dividing friends, family, and coworkers. Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. We are not AI, at least not yet. We're coming to you live from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York. I'm Christina Ruffini.
I'm David Gura. It is Sunday, August the 2nd. Welcome to our listeners and viewers across all of Bloomberg's platforms on radio, television, streaming on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg Business app. And a lot happening this morning. I guess the thing we should point to first is this Trump taco, Truth Social
what's not
taco.
Happening.
Yes, there was a lot of anticipation on the heels of that Wall Street Journal report that the president, locked and loaded, as he's fond of saying, was going to mount a big attack on Iran over this weekend. He has walked that back in recent hours.
That's right, reporting that there were a couple calls from some allies and maybe some maneuvering in the Middle East to make that happen. But, you know, we're going to talk to folks about what else that could be related to, including oil prices. But first, we're going to talk to Nathan Hager, who's in for Lisa Mateo this morning with the headlines.
And we're going to start right there. Good morning. President Trump says he is ordering the U.S. military to hold off on new strikes against Iran. That says he says the Islamic Republic and other Middle Eastern nations have agreed to the parameters on a deal. On Friday, the Wall Street Journal did report that the military had been ordered to carry out fresh attacks as soon as this weekend. Saudi state-run media are reporting the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman held a call with President Trump yesterday, urging dialogue. Back in this country, a shooting at a fast food restaurant in Twin Falls, Idaho has left 3 people dead, 7 others hurt. This happened yesterday afternoon at an In-N-Out Burger. Twin Falls Police Chief Matthew Hicks says hundreds were in the area at the time.
We believe that the threat to the community is over. The suspected shooter in this incident is deceased. He was nearby on the scene there, and we are working, trying to ascertain his identity and the motivations behind that. We'll be able to figure that out in the next coming days.
Now, witnesses say the gunman came out from the drive-thru with an AR-style rifle, and another man with a pistol fired at the shooter. City officials say the suspect's body was found in an area near that In-N-Out Burger restaurant. More than a dozen wildfires are burning across Washington state. The biggest, the Old Trails fire near Spokane, where large parts of that county are under mandatory evacuation orders. Spokane Mayor Lisa Brown is urging residents to heed the warnings.
We're not in a place right now where we can talk about the magnitude of the property destruction, but it is a very dangerous situation.
About 4,000 firefighters are working statewide to put out the flames, and the National Guard has also been deployed. A bombing at an upscale restaurant in Moscow, Russia, has left 3 people dead and 21 others injured. Now, Russia's anti-terrorism agency says the blast killed a security guard who tried to prevent an unidentified woman from bringing an improvised explosive in a box inside that Italian restaurant. The woman and a customer were also killed. Authorities have not said who they think the intended victim might have been. And Michigan has joined Minnesota in announcing cyber attacks on its water supply. State officials say 9 of the state's water systems were the target of attacks that intelligence officials have blamed on Iran. Earlier this week, Minnesota reported at least 30 of its systems were hacked as well. Now, Michigan says all of its facilities are operating safely as the investigation continues. David and Christina.
Nathan, thank you very much. The president blaming that on Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, despite what we're hearing from the EPA and the FBI, but certainly a story that merits watching here. Thank you very much, Nathan. Great to see you as well.
Perennial target there of the administration.
As Nathan mentioned just a moment ago, President Trump announced he would hold off on striking Iran as long as a deal with the Middle East nation is reached quickly. He wrote this on social media, in part, quote, "We've just been asked by Iran and other Middle Eastern countries to hold off any attack in that the perimeters of a deal has been agreed to. This would include the immediate, complete, and total opening of the Hormuz Strait and an end to Iran's nuclear threat. Based on this request, I have agreed for the future benefit of the world and likewise the survival of a successful and prosperous Iran to cancel the attack subject to being able to rapidly make a deal. The clauses always get me on these posts.
It's the quickness of that
Yes,
deal
that's
that
right.
seems to have been a sticking point. But, try again. All right, joining us here on set, we have Bloomberg White House correspondent Jeff Mason in bright and early, and not quite as early, but still bright. We've got Dan Williams over in Jerusalem. Thank you so much for joining us. Jeff, I want to start with you. I was making some calls to some sources in the Middle East this morning. It seems like the messaging is that this was MBS calling Trump and trying to talk him down. But it sounds to me like there were a lot of allies involved in trying to pressure the administration to put a lid on this for now for a couple reasons. But obviously the president has just met with Netanyahu when he was in D.C. as well, who has a different opinion on how this conflict should go. When it comes to who's whispering in the president's ear, who seems to have the most influence at this time?
Well, I'm glad you said whispering in his ear, because that's one thing we know about President Trump, right? Is that he often will make his decision based on the last person to speak to him.
Bit of object permanence going on there, yeah.
Indeed. And so you're right to mention that a few days ago, Netanyahu was there, and then came the reporting about this expected strike. There's also, of course, the political ramifications of a huge escalation in the war. If they had gone ahead with this, no doubt it would have had another impact on oil prices. We are inching closer to those midterms, and Republicans are not eager to see a massive escalation. That said, it is another example of a taco withdrawal, as it were, or stand down. And that's not really great for President Trump either.
Dan Williams, I'm going to go back to that post that I fumbled my way through there just a moment ago from the president. I'm going to go to the last, or the penultimate line of that there. It says, the country of Israel joins me in this commitment. What do we know about the level of alignment here between Israel and the U.S.? Yes, in this particular circumstance, but more broadly here on the trajectory of the war as it stands.
We know that the country was preparing for some kind of escalation over the weekend. It wasn't entirely clear that that would have been an escalation initiated in concert between Israel and the United States. Officials we spoke to were kind of iffy about that. It seemed as much a matter of being concerned that should the Americans go it alone, Israel might find itself this time fired upon by Iran and would then fire back and then effectively be part of the fray. As to what was claimed initially and is now claimed by the US president, that the Israelis stood down, presumably they were poised as the US was poised to attack. No confirmation of that. Interestingly enough, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was due to hold a weekly cabinet meeting. They generally are held on Sundays, and that's usually a time when he addresses the affairs of the day. And given that he just returned from Washington, as you noted, traditionally, this is when he would brief his ministers on what was achieved in that trip. That hasn't happened. He hasn't commented at all about this, nor about the president's surprise announcement on Friday that Hamas would disarm in the Gaza Strip. That's obviously linked to this Iran crisis. They're all interlinked in what has become a multi-front war in the Middle East involving Israel, and when it comes to Iran, the United States as well. So you have a silent prime minister. Two of his ministers, his security cabinet ministers, so people generally in the know were on the radio. One of them actually said that Israel had indications that indeed Trump was telling the truth when it came to a potentially new deal around the Strait of Hormuz. He said there are indications that the Iranians have softened what he called their previous red lines on the issue of access and egress for shipping in that strategic waterway. It would appear that on that front, the Israelis agree with what Trump is saying, though the Israelis may not have been poised for a full joint action against Iran.
Jeff, I want to ask you, Dan was referencing there some of the security concerns, and there was this report in the Washington Post earlier this week that the U.S. might not, that a general in the Pentagon had warned the U.S. might not have the resources to defend Israel from a full-scale assault without some significant redeployment of resources. This is something we're hearing over and over again. You know, we've asked about it on this show, but the number of interceptors that are left, the capacity of the military, and the fact that these ships have been deployed way longer than their usual dock time, and whether or not the military has the resources to keep this going indefinitely. How much do you think the security issue factored in here in this decision?
It's hard to say how much it factored in specifically on this decision, but it does seem like it's real. And I thought that that was emblematic, or that was manifested when President Trump was asked about it, I think a little over a week ago on Air Force One. And he, of course, at first dismissed the reports about losing or not having enough munitions, and then said, I wish we had more. And that's just kind of the saying the quiet part out loud piece of covering President Trump. When he says that, the acknowledgement of that, I think, is a suggestion that it is a real concern for him.
Dan Williams, to broaden this out a little bit, you mentioned the deal that the president announced or floated a couple of days ago here having to do with his board of peace and some agreement in Gaza. Just getting up to speed on the news that's taken place here over the last 24 hours. There were strikes in Gaza by the Israeli Air Force, I believe. We saw strikes in Lebanon as well. Highlights the fact that all of this still seems incredibly tenuous. And I wonder what we can take away from that as we have this conversation swirling here in the United States about the prospects for there being some advancement in that peace deal that the president has talked about. Well, all the while, it seems like definitionally here, ceasefire is a very fuzzy term.
Indeed, it always has been. It generally is in the Middle East. And in fact, I think the President Trump even said that. He quipped a few weeks ago that in the Middle East, a ceasefire is when you fire, but fire less. So that certainly applies on these various fronts. When it comes to Gaza, we have a very interesting situation here. We have the US president, we have the Board of Peace announcing this Hamas disarmament first, Hamas coming in later and giving a hedged agreement to disarm, but without the scope that perhaps would have been envisaged by the United States, by Israel, and attaching upfront conditions which Israel and the US would argue have to be downstream, specifically talking about an Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, an affirmation of future Palestinian statehood. Those are mentioned in the Trump plan for peace for Gaza. They're not mentioned up front, and indeed the Palestinian statehood issue is right at the back. In the last clause, it's phrased rather aspirationally. What Hamas has done now is basically say yes, but it would appear that it realizes that Netanyahu is in a political quagmire, even though there's every indication the Israelis would welcome this Board of Peace formula. And indeed, we understand that there was an Israeli delegation in Cairo where the last talks, the finishing touches on that Hamas agreement, such as it was, were reached. There was an Israeli delegation speaking with the Egyptians. They kind of been surprised by this. I think the timing, the volume of it surprised them. And it's inconvenient for Netanyahu and his government that's seeking re-election in October because the optics of any kind of drawdown, any kind of tamp down of Israeli action in Gaza, especially when it comes to fugitive suspects in the October 7th attack, which whom Israel has vowed to kill or capture. Very many of those being killed recently in Gaza have been accused, and indeed one who was killed on Thursday was identified by a former hostage as having not only held her but raped her in captivity. This is very much a fraught issue for Israelis. It's not something they want to give up. They see justice, or at least the closing of the national psychological circle around October 7th, hinging on the continued elimination, as they call it, of those men who took part in October 7th. And I think Israel is signaling now that whatever deal is held with Hamas's insistence on an immediate full cessation of Israeli military action, Israel is trying to carve out a lacuna for that, an exception, at least when it comes to those alleged October 7th perpetrators.
Jeff, I want to ask you about calling it a deal is inaccurate, but this pause that we've got this morning, part of the agreement, let's go with, Israeli media this morning is reporting that part of what's put the pause on this is the Iranian foreign minister agreed to a compromise deal opening up the Strait of Hormuz. And part of that compromise deal is the shipping lanes are going to use the Iranian route and exit out through Oman. It seems to me more and more, if there is going to be some sort of a durable deal, that's likely going to be a part of it. Is this something that you think the White House can come to terms with, and can they sell that in a way that doesn't come off as a big loss for the White House? Because as we've talked about over and over again, the Strait was not an issue before this conflict, and now it very much will continue to be one, it seems like, for the future.
And as a result, it's been at the top of the negotiating list for the White House almost from day one when Iran reacted that way. So sure, I mean, if it's established that leads to energy flows going back to normal or near normal, they can certainly present that as a success. But I think just for a moment of standing back, on Friday when the president was holding his cabinet meeting in Camp David, he talked about Iran, and he talked about having lost faith in Iran. He talked about how he was getting angrier.
You wrote about that the two sides have lost faith, and they're both calling names at each other.
Did indeed, because he said it. I mean, and you could see, a bunch of media organizations, including ours, had stories going up before that Camp David meeting talking about his frustration. Well, you don't need to talk to behind-the-scenes sources about that. You could see his frustration when he was talking about it on Friday. And I think you just have to remember that when 2 days later he says, we're going to get a deal within 48 hours. If past is prologue, which is a phrase I keep using right now, that is not how things have gone for the last 6 months. Doesn't mean it couldn't change, but we'll see.
Dan, I was listening to Michelle Hussein's podcast on the way in. She's talking to Peter Frankopan, the historian. And something that he brought up here is the role of Gulf nations in light of all of this. So here we are approaching 6 months of this war. They're looking at their situation, the degree to which they've had a sense of support from the U.S. or not here. And he made a very interesting analogy. He said they could be looking at their position kind of in the way that Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, talks about middle powers more broadly. They could see the influence and rise of Iran here in this conflict, the power that it has, and wonder if they need to kind of reconfigure their position geopolitically. And I wonder what you make of that, the way, we talk about how they're not a monolith, the Gulf states are not a monolith, but there is seemingly a yawning need here for them to kind of come together strategically and economically in light of what's happened here over the last few months.
I think it's obvious, it's self-evident. There is a multipolarity here and also an increasing sense of self-reliance. You'll remember that just last week, the Saudis struck militarily Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. That was a pretty rare military action for Saudi Arabia, and what was no less rare was Saudi Arabia announcing it pretty much as it happened. This was matched by Saudi actions against the Houthis in Yemen. It's not a country certainly that hasn't been militarily muscular in the past, but one that's generally practiced discretion around such actions when they have happened. There have been reports, not yet fully corroborated, of other Gulf countries carrying out individual military actions against Iran. It's almost as if they're testing the waters of their own ability to jump into the fray with what military capacity they have. We also know that several of them have been establishing alternative routes in order to reduce their reliance on Hormuz, in order to reduce Iran's clout over them when it comes to controlling Hormuz. We know of an alternative route that's being used by the Saudis to the Red Sea, and is being piggybacked upon by some of its Gulf partners. So yes, certainly everyone's looking to themselves. They realize that the United States has not delivered, at least not with the briskness that it hoped to deliver victory against Iran, nor Israel. The Iranians, while battered by this war, are certainly sounding defiant. And should they manage to walk away with a tolling hold on the Hormuz, that might go a long way to offsetting the damages that they incurred during this war. So the Middle East entirely is looking to what the future holds. And by the way, I'm in Israel. Israel may find itself quietly hatching individual pacts with some of those countries that may not want to recognize it publicly, but do recognize its military assistance and the importance of it.
Yeah, I do get the impression there's a lot more behind the scenes than people are willing to say publicly right now for a lot of obvious reasons. Yeah. Dan Williams joining us once again from Jerusalem. Thank you so much. And Jeff Mason, you'll be back, right? You'll be back at 8? Yep. We'll see you in a bit.
We'll hold you here.
All
right, coming up here, SpaceX about to release its first earnings report ever. The company went public just a couple of months ago. Its stock is already half of its early peak. We're going to talk to our colleague Lauren Grush about what investors are hoping to hear from the company. That's straight ahead on Bloomberg This Weekend, on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television.
Thanks for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Nathan Hager. Let's update you on today's top stories. Ukraine struck a Rosneft oil refinery in Russia's Saratov region overnight as it continues a near daily series of attacks on Moscow's fuel industry. Officials say Kyiv also struck an airfield more than 600 miles east of the Ukrainian capital, which they say has been used to launch cruise missile strikes against Ukraine. Regional authorities in Russia say 2 people were killed in today's attack. A plane carrying European tourists crashed outside the Peruvian city of Nazca, killing 13 on board. The group was on its way to view the famed Nazca lines. Those are expansive geoglyphs that Peru's indigenous population carved into the desert hundreds of years ago. The airline involved has offered scenic flights over the Nazca lines for more than a decade. Europe's wildfire emergency has shifted from France and Spain to Greece now. Separate fires have burned more than 16,000 acres on the Gulf of Corinth, and blazes earlier in the week charred the islands of Crete and Paros. 3 firefighters have died as gale force winds continue to fan those flames. And Hungary is shutting down its only nuclear plant due to a record-low Danube River. The country's new prime minister, Peter Magyar, says a shortage of water to cool the PAX facility has it operating at just over a tenth of its 2,000-megawatt capacity. Now, this is the first time this plant is shut down in its 44-year history as sustained drought continues across Central Europe. Christina and David.
Thank you very much.
Really
Thinking about
shocking.
what Paul Tugwell said yesterday, just about how bad
Exactly
the weather has been, and the winds, those gale force winds that you mentioned.
Heat and
complicating
wildfires.
efforts.
I was in France a couple years ago during a drought and a heat wave, and they were doing a kayak tour, and there wasn't even enough water to float the boats. It was crazy. And this is like used to be an aqueduct. Yeah,
for so long.
That's really insane.
It's incredible.
Nathan, thank you very much. Appreciate that. This week, for the first time since its IPO, SpaceX will report earnings. Elon Musk's Space Exploration Technologies Corporation went public just 7 weeks ago, and after a huge debut, shares have dropped well below its initial price.
We spoke earlier to the always excellent Lauren Grush, Bloomberg's news space reporter, about what to expect. SpaceX stock is down about 30% from its debut. $150 market debut, it's down about roughly 50% from its all-time high. And we were talking yesterday, correct me if I'm wrong, that valuation means Elon Musk's personal wealth valuation lost more money than anyone else has ever had.
Still very rich, Elon Musk.
Still incredibly rich. But what does this mean for investors come Tuesday? I'd be fine with it.
Don't shed a tear for Elon Musk.
But if you're an investor and you're looking at this on next week on Tuesday, what does this make you think?
Well, I think what's interesting about this, and at least for me, is we're kind of in uncharted territory when it comes to SpaceX. This is our first earnings call. They've been a notoriously private company for a very long time. So I think we're all kind of going into this together a little unclear about what exactly we're looking for. I know personally what I am looking for are going to be updates on how they're going to get to that really ambitious roadmap that they sold the entire IPO on, right? So AI data centers in space, the V3 satellites, progress on Starship. I think those are going to be the things that will really, move the needle in terms of, are they actually making progress there? And then I know that, when it comes to their AI investments, that's going to be a huge part of it too. One of the things we saw when they were going public is just how much CapEx goes into that AI infrastructure and work. That took me by surprise, as a space reporter. So I think that will also be a big narrative and something that investors are looking at going into the earnings call next week.
You talk about the notorious privacy of this company going through the IPO process. We did glean some more information about the way that it operates and its ambitions, as you've been describing here on the show. We're going to hear from Elon Musk presumably as well, or not? Are we going to hear from Gwynne Shotwell, the head of it? What's your sense of what we're going to hear or not from Elon Musk about the performance over the last quarter?
I mean, I assume that Elon will be there. If you can predict what Elon is going to say, I'm going to come to you for all my financial advice, because I think he can be quite, hard to pin down. But yes, he probably will wax poetic about many of the things that we often hear him say about when it comes to SpaceX, about, the importance of making life multiplanetary and, being excited about the future. I anticipate some of those go-to lines, but in terms of what he's going to say about the business, again, this is all new for me. For the past, however long I've been covering this company, I've never gotten this kind of access. So it will be interesting to see what a public-facing company like SpaceX will be like.
I'll be really curious to see something we talked about last time we had you on, which is the profitability breakdown of the different sectors of the company. We were talking about how the Starlink is really what's propping up a lot of those other more speculative goals of Musk. But he also really needs capital for all the things you just talked about, all the places investors are going to want to see progress. If that valuation, if the stock doesn't rebound, where's he going to get that money?
Well, I think for now, they're probably in a really good place, right? They raised, $85 billion through that IPO. That's a huge amount of capital. And I think they're going to be, well satisfied with that for the time being. I guess where it might get tricky is down the line if they need to raise funds again, if they want to do any kind of acquisitions, then the stock price will come into play. For now, I think they are probably in a good place and have a lot of leverage when it comes to what that money that they've raised. But as we've seen, the rocket business and the AI business is a very capital intensive structure. And so perhaps they will need money down the line, and then that will become a problem. But I think for now, they're probably sitting pretty on that $85 billion.
Oh, all right. Okay.
During the IPO process, there was some talk about Elon Musk consolidating his empire, maybe Tesla merging with SpaceX. And there was this report in the Wall Street Journal last week, indicating that maybe he would consider kind of splitting off Tesla's Chinese business from the business as a whole. I'm curious of what that conversation is like. We have seen SpaceX obviously become a conglomerate in its own right, incorporating Starlink, and yes, the rocket business. It's the AI business. It's become like a much broader thing. What did that report kind of make you think? Again, Bloomberg hasn't confirmed it's a journal report, but just about his ambitions when it comes to his larger corporate empire.
Sure. I would say that, years before now, I would have put a merger between SpaceX and Tesla. That would not have been on my bingo card. But what also I didn't anticipate was the merger or the acquisition of xAI with SpaceX. So I think we're, nothing is out of the question at this moment. So I think we're all kind of anticipating that it could potentially happen. And one of the, I think a big tell for me personally was, Gwen Shotwell, when she was asked about it directly, did not downplay it. To me, that seems like a big indicator that it's definitely on the table. So whether or not it's going to happen, if it's a done deal, that's still an open question. But I think if it were to happen, I don't think anybody would be terribly surprised at this point.
Say Elon Musk calling it fake news on X. Just want to. It's a formal statement.
Well, there's that.
It's a formal statement from Elon.
I'm not engaging on that. Let's pivot a bit. How is Starship doing? Because we saw the 13th test of that rocket. How important was that flight? And then what's next for Starship and these missions to the moon and beyond? We talked about the prospectus being all these pictures of Mars missions and data centers in space and space stations. Is this going according to the plan? Is there a plan?
Well, the last Starship test, I think, couldn't have gone much better. Obviously, there's room for improvement always, but it really completed its mission end to end. And as you're, showing in that video there, the Starship vehicle actually did this fun little belly flop in the ocean rather than blow up.
It doesn't even look real. I mean, watching this video, it's crazy.
I know. It's really... I would say SpaceX's production work is on par with their rocketry skills.
I would agree with that. Yep.
But, I have to come in and give some caveats. There is a long laundry list of things that they need to do in order for Starship to be an operational vehicle, both as a launch provider and then also as this, deep space vehicle that can take cargo and eventually people to the moon and Mars. So it was definitely a great step, but, there's still a lot that needs to be done. A reminder that Starship needs to be refueled in orbit in order to go to distant destinations. That's a type of technology that has never been done at the scale that Starship is going to need to be done at. So, there's still quite a lot left. They might be on track very soon to be launching satellites, but there's still, they still got some tweaks that they need to figure out. And then, we actually did some reporting this past week that, there's some experts that are questioning whether the heat shield on Starship is actually going to be able to enable rapid reusability of the vehicle, because it still seems to be suffering damage and cracks when it comes back from space. And that really can't happen if they're going to be launching back to back to back. So, they're still in research and development mode. There's still some work they've got to do. It's a very ambitious vehicle, though, so that's not surprising.
There's an old guy in my neighborhood. He sets up a telescope.
Are you not the old guy in your neighborhood?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Telescope on the street. Amateur astronomer. Often it's pointed at the moon, and if you walk by at night, he'll let you take a look at the moon. I gather, Lauren,
that's lovely.
It's lovely. Wanted to get that out there. On Wednesday, if I were to look at the moon, I gather there's a chance that I could see an old SpaceX rocket crashing into it. What's the likelihood this is going to happen? What's the backstory here, Lauren?
Yeah, so there is a Falcon 9 upper stage. It's the upper portion of the rocket that was left in space after completing a mission, and it's actually on a path that's going to intersect with the moon. And from what I understand, yes, the debris plume might actually be visible if you're out there watching for it. So this actually has happened before. Other rockets, the pieces of them that have been left over after a mission have actually intersected with the moon before. It's nothing to worry about. Our moon will be fine. We've also crashed things into the moon before intentionally. But I think what it also illustrates is, the fact that we have junk in space. Space junk has always been a big problem, and we really don't like having things that stick around in the space around Earth that we don't have control over. And so this just kind of illustrates part of that problem. But for now, it's a neat little byproduct of a past mission that you might be able to see from Earth.
Lauren, do you have a telescope? Are you going to watch it?
I don't have a telescope. Isn't that wild? I probably should have one, but maybe where I live, it might not be so easy to see the stars.
That's all right. Come on in. Apparently, we can crush David's neighbors. It'll be great.
How it goes. See if I can.
Okay, sounds good. I'll take you up on it.
Lauren, thank you very much. Lauren Grush joining us to talk about those SpaceX earnings coming up this week.
You don't have a telescope. Did you have a telescope as a kid?
No, I didn't. But Chapel Hill, where I grew up, has an amazing planetarium with a big telescope. So
oh, that's pretty cool.
I'd go there every now and then.
You also spent time in Colorado, which has great stars. We had one as kids.
Absolutely, wide open spaces. But anyway, I'll wander around the neighborhood and see if my man is out there tonight. But
that's right, the guy who.
Yeah, as mentioned. But,
I do think, even though we're going to talk a lot about AI coming up, AI, this is one of those places that I would have found AI helpful as a kid, because we always had the telescope, but we didn't know what we were looking at. And if there was something that could have told us, that's like a nice, friendly
Get that
use
app.
of AI.
You can hold it up to the sky and it'll tell you what the constellations are. Yeah, I don't know. I'll find out what the name of it is.
All right, astronomer, please help me out here. Coming up, it is still one of the most read stories.
We can keep talking about astronomy if you want.
No. I got to be in that class. It was not my best class. Focus, Dura. All right, up next, we're going to talk about situational awareness, and we're not talking about mine, which in general is not good. We are talking about the $45 billion hedge fund tied to AI investments, what this says about the $1 trillion global AI trade. David, you've been reading this story.
Fascinatingly here, this is a fund that had a very difficult week, but is still, when you kind of pull back and look at it, doing all right. I mean, yes, this was a major fire sale.
It survived, right?
It survived, and the founder, who we're going to talk about, getting married this weekend as well. So a busy week.
It's going to be a fascinating reception. All right, that's ahead.
That in just a minute.
And a lot more. Stay tuned.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg this weekend. I'm Nathan Hager. Let's update you now on today's top stories. Pressure continues to build on FIFA President Gianni Infantino. The UK's Guardian newspaper is reporting that members of the FIFA Council are attempting to force an extraordinary general meeting that could lead to a full-blown leadership challenge. And this report says this effort was underway before Infantino's scrapped plans to sell stakes in the World Cup. FIFA Council members are demanding an independent review into Infantino's decision to reverse American Fuller and Balogun's red card at this year's tournament. The Los Angeles Dodgers have landed the biggest prize ahead of the MLB trade deadline, picking up two-time reigning Cy Young winner Tarik Skubal from the Detroit Tigers last night. So this is the team that drafted Skubal in 2018 and turned him into a star. Now he joins a high-priced Dodger roster that already includes Shohei Ohtani, fellow two-time Cy Young winner Blake Snell, and Mookie Betts. And Vincent Pastore has died. The veteran actor played tough guys and mobsters, including the big gangster who ratted out Tony Soprano on the long-running HBO series. Pastore's manager says he was found at his home in New York City Island and hadn't been heard from for a few days. Vincent Pastore was 80 years old. David and Christina.
A couple things here. A glaring cultural hole that I have not seen The Sopranos. I'm going to admit that here on television.
So I'm not the only one.
Oh my gosh!
Seriously,
wow.
boys, seriously.
And then
all right, we're having movie night at my place.
Totally impressed. He lived on City Island, which is such a great place, and you, as a new person here in New York, need to go. It's up in the Bronx, and it's like a great little maritime village.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Nathan.
Nathan, thank you. Leopold Aschenbrenner, hedge fund Situational Awareness, which sold a chunk of its AI-related public equities on Thursday and saw its assets slump sharply, is still in the news here on this Sunday morning.
That's right. This sharp sell-off in AI-related stocks has kind of highlighted the risk behind some of the market's biggest AI bet. Ken Griffin, Citadel purchasing a significant portion of those holdings. All right, here to explain to us what's going on and why it matters, we've got Hema Parmar. She's Bloomberg's news investing reporter. Investing, not investigative as well a little bit, though, today, right? Because we were tracking this story, and just kind of break down to us who this guy is, what happened, and why it matters.
Yes. So Leopold Aschenbrenner runs this hedge fund, Situational Awareness. It grew to $45 billion. They were taking highly levered bets on a concentrated portfolio of AI investments, long and short, and also private positions. All of the trades basically turned against the fund. The shorts were not shorting. The longs were blowing up.
People were like actively targeting him in some of these investments, right?
Well, people had been closely following his fund because he had become something of like a wonderkind. He put out this manifesto document that talked about AI. So people were closely looking at his portfolio because it was also so concentrated and also because there was a great deal of leverage. So when people started to get a sense of these stocks are declining, the firm is sort of spiraling, what is going to happen? I think there was a lot of concern. I think there were some funds that were shorting some of the stocks, which didn't help matters at all. And so what happened was the firm needed to find some money. They were up against margin calls. They began having conversations with a variety of different hedge funds, including Citadel, which is the one they ultimately went with to go and buy a huge chunk of their stock investments so that they could ease the panic, have the capital to manage their margin calls, and ultimately the firm's assets fell from $45 to $10 billion.
But, astoundingly, your reporting others is that the fund is fine. I mean, he's doing all right.
That's actually, I'd missed that part of the story, is I kind of assumed this was done, and I didn't realize that. Getting
married this week, and maybe he's gotten married already here, but this hasn't been a great cataclysm for him in a way that you might expect.
Well, he still runs $10 billion, so that's still a very sizable hedge fund, but it's not been a great week. To have your assets fall that much, to basically be in a situation where you need to stop the blow up of your fund. He has private investments, which are illiquid, so they basically help anchor the firm. But he was even willing to sell some of his private stocks. He has $5 billion in Anthropic and was having conversations to potentially unload $3.5 billion of it. So that shows how much panic there was and just how dire the situation was to be thinking about selling both your publics and your privates, to have sorted out a deal days before your wedding.
Yes.
So it's not great. Performance was down 70% in the past month. Performance for the whole year, still up 80%, but I would really say to be mindful of thinking about when the investor got in. If you were an investor that got into this fund in January, generally you're fine. But if you got in the past few months, you are not okay.
You called him a wunderkind, and I want to stick with this for a moment here because it is astonishing how young he is. He's 24 years old.
Yes.
As you point out in the reporting you've done, no investment experience prior to this. He worked at OpenAI. He was kind of affiliated with Sam Bankman-Fried, who's serving a 30-year sentence in prison for his work at FTX. What gave him the notoriety that he got, and beyond that, the level of trust and investment that he got here in a very short period of time, given that he has no experience?
No, it's a very good question. His manifesto gathered a lot of following.
This was like a paper about what AI is going to become.
168-page paper about AI, the risks, the future.
And it was called situational awareness, right? That's where this name comes from.
Correct, exactly. And that's what he named his hedge fund off of. But, typically with hedge funds, we see investors as being pensions, endowments, foundation, these big institutions that have huge risk management, due diligence processes. And a lot of the investors in situational awareness are founders or individuals, Silicon Valley types. A lot of the more institutional investors did not invest because they were more cautious about the risk parameters. They were more cautious about how professional the firm looked.
Interesting.
So it is a bit of an indicator when you see these significant players opting to not invest. Still, he did raise a ton of money from investing types like founders of firms. But you do see a different type of investor profile with this fund than you would normally from a traditional hedge fund. Investors don't like it when firms take on a ton of leverage in a concentrated bet.
Yeah.
Okay, but given all of that, why does Ken Griffith want to get involved in here? Why would Citadel pick this up? Why would anyone bail them out, given all the red flags you just mentioned?
Yeah, so this is a page from Citadel's playbook.
Okay.
They will see a firm in trouble, and they will jump in to get a good deal. They've done this in the past with a fund that blew up called Amaranth. They've done this with Soward. They got involved in Melvin Capital when that was sort of on its decline. Ken Griffin lives through these moments when you can swoop in and then buy a huge portfolio at a 10% discount. And now you have these great assets that are likely going to go up at some point, where it's a multi-strat firm, so the risk is more managed because the firm is so complicated. So it's a great deal for him. And frankly, Citadel's been doing pretty mediocre this year. So this deal is likely to help lift their returns.
Maybe as we wrap up here, you can kind of put this amazing story in the context of the week that we've been through here. We've had these big hyperscalers reporting earnings. There's been a lot of conversation just about the viability of AI. You mentioned how levered these bets were.
Yeah.
What are the larger lessons to be learned here for the market more broadly about what's happened, and how has what's transpired here, Citadel buying what it has, kind of changed the general parameters surrounding the market and AI within the market?
No, I mean, what an interesting time to be. What a fascinating, fascinating, like
a curse to live in interesting times or something. I know.
Because we're seeing this wild situation, then we're seeing the circular nature of AI investing. We're seeing a lot of concerns over CapEx spending. We have these big projections about how AI is going to transform the world, which it very likely will, but we don't know exactly yet what that looks like in the short term. So we are seeing so much volatility in the space, concerns over software. There are funds that are like hedge funds that are really bullish on AI and making these huge bets. There's also another fund like Viking, which has really stepped back and is a lot more cautious on the space. So you see this divergence in these big traditional hedge fund players and how they are investing, which is fascinating. And then we have this sort of situation which really calls the attention to what is the fund structure? Like, how much leverage are you using? What is the risk? How at risk are LPs and investors to the public-private dynamics? And a fund that's fully betting on AI, it's cautionary, but it's also a story that we have seen time and time again when it comes to leverage and when it comes to investing.
Yes.
So we should know this.
Maybe let's vet the charismatic young man with little experience before we give him billions and billions of dollars. Or just give it to me, and I'll
you'll happily oblige.
I'll try my hand.
Emma, thank you. Great to see you. Thank you for coming in as well.
Please come back.
All right, up next here, BTW, as I'm fond of saying, Nathan Hager filling in very capably for Lisa Mateo with more than most read stories this week on the terminal and Bloomberg.com, including the must-have status symbol for the summer.
Oh, I don't know
Guess
what that is. I guess we're going to find out.
Okay.
All right, and you can explore live streaming news and interviews, all our Bloomberg TV shows, documentaries, reporter analysis, and more in one place, Bloomberg.com/video. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend. Bloomberg B, this T, Weekend W, BTW. As we say, David Gura with Christina
I'm too tired
Ruffini.
to have this fight with you today.
Lisa Mateo, as you've ascertained, out this week. Nathan Hager with us with some stories you might have missed. You've been mining the terminal, mining Bloomberg.com, mining outside sites as well. I should say it's an opportunity for us to look broadly at the news.
Not using AI, using your brain.
Yeah, can't do that. Critical thinking. We even do that this early in the morning. Good morning.
It's hard.
It is a struggle.
But there is coffee. There is coffee available.
Speaking of drinking, this isn't about coffee. This is about drinking culture, because I don't think it's any secret that the beverage industry has been dealing with the changes, 20-somethings kind of pulling back because of health concerns or the economy.
Yeah, we just did a story at Jim Beam, and they're owned by this big Japanese conglomerate.
Well, remind me of this, because you said that they're actually getting into not a non-alcoholic whiskey, but like other...
No, but Jim Beam, they're doing non-alcoholic cocktails to try to, get these young people who are not drinking alcohol to purchase some of their products.
Well, this isn't just a Western phenomenon or here in the States. It's even spreading to China, although the reasons here are a little bit different. This is really about a generational divide. This was from the Wall Street Journal this week. A sober, curious generation is challenging the business culture of heavy drinking because, you can see it right here for our listeners on radio. They do toasts. Yes. This has been a part of the culture for decades now. Some business leaders say that, you can tell whether a deal is going to go down based on how many toasts are in the deal. So an initial business deal isn't even about business. It's about just doing the toast. And this is around a national drink called Baijiu. It's actually a $170 billion business. This is a clear spirit that's distilled from sorghum, and it's kind of the traditional alcoholic beverage that Chinese business people and at social gatherings do these toasts, but only about a fifth of adults in China ages 25 to 35 name it as their preferred alcoholic drink. They say, at least one worker says, it burns your throat and stinks.
Very
Have you
terrible.
had it?
Oh, you've had
yes,
it?
I have.
Oh, I've had soju, but I've never had this.
It's extremely strong.
Well, would you say that the aftertaste is worse than a mix of funky cheese and fermented juice?
You know, I don't even know if I had
time
time to process the taste because it was so powerful and strong.
wow.
It reminds me
Now
of
I kind
that.
of want it, but
Reminds me of like Malort. Isn't that the Chicago drink? It's like a very strong.
I don't know what that is either.
Well, I
Never
will
heard
bring
of that
some in
one.
for you to have, but
I mean, I had moonshine once.
well,
it almost
that can
killed
be quite
me.
sweet and
So the
comforting.
bottom line about how this is working in China is that it's not just about giving up alcohol necessarily. It's about changing the way that young people decide to drink
Interesting.
and sort of rejecting or, going a little bit against how the older generation have done it with their alcoholic spirits.
All right, what else you got?
Well, you mentioned the must-have summer
Yes.
status symbol.
Well
What is
teased.
this?
Well
This
teased
is
going to
something to
break.
drink.
Hopefully it's not a tan because we've all learned that's not happening for me.
Well, it's something in a bottle. It's not sunscreen. It's a $3.99 bottle of water. So yes, you can forget your Baiju flavored lattes
Yes.
or your bubble tea. This is Lunin water. It's showing up at bougie grocery stores, private events here in New York
So
City.
Christina must have seen it
And
on the shelves.
How dare you? Also, yes, I have.
Oh, have you now? And the way they sell this is it's sourced from a Southern California spring
Yeah,
using
sure it is.
stainless steel filtration, adding natural minerals like Celtic sea salt, magnesium, potassium, and calcium. All this for the low, low price
Yes.
of $3.99.
Wow.
Now, this was co-founded last year, actually, by a woman named Clara Sieg. She's a former venture capitalist who,
Of course she is.
when she was, deciding to get pregnant, getting ready to, she decided to educate herself about microplastics and found that she says that the stainless steel filtration process gets out more of the microplastics. But when you talk to experts, they say, water's water.
Water's water.
And even if there is, Evian or Liquid Death,
Volvic.
there is no evidence that any of these elite brands are
It does
going to
taste
give you
different,
any other
though.
health
Water and
advantage.
glass does taste different. than
Lunacy.
water
It's called
and
lunacy.
It's called Lunin.
Lunin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Potato,
Yes,
potato.
all right.
All right,
What else?
Nathan.
What else you got?
Editorializing.
Any more drinking stories?
Not
Any more
me.
drinking stories for us
Why would
today?
I editorialize? Never.
Okay.
Never.
So we're going to go from luxury water to luxury hotels here
Okay.
because this is a new trend across Europe, actually. It's not just about the thread count or the buzzy restaurant. History is the new amenity. This story is actually from Bloomberg this week. You can go to the Raffles London at the OWO and sip martinis in a basement that was once used by British intelligence
love
because,
that.
of course,
That's-
OWO.
You're
Very
speaking my
cool.
language. History
Yeah.
nerd and bougie hotel.
Yeah,
This is
pop
great.
quiz. OWO stands for
Office of...
Wartime.
along the lines, Old War Office.
Oh, something
War
like that.
Office,
Okay.
okay.
All right.
The Nomad London, you can tour old prison cells where Oscar Wilde once waited for sentencing. So guests are paying upwards of $13,000 or
Well,
$1,300 a night.
That's
No, it's
still
not
a
that
lot.
If the
big.
That's
martinis
still
are
a
strong
lot.
enough, you
So
might.
you can stay at places that were once limited to the most powerful. And like I
Awesome.
said, this is a trend across Europe. There are old ministries in Paris and Lisbon that are turning into hotels. The former Italian central bank headquarters in Rome, because they got to offload some of these old buildings as the governments are modernizing, and these hotel chains are saying, you know what, we'll go ahead and snap them up and give our guests an experience that they'll never forget
Yeah, I
compared
do
to like the
think it's a-
museums or
totally.
the spa or whatever,
I understand there's an access issue here and it's not equitable, but I also do think it is nice to preserve these buildings that might otherwise not have a purpose. At least someone is paying to save them, and if you got to buy a $14 martini to help
An old post
keep the
office
bricks
pavilion
stand up.
in
Yeah.
D.C.
Well, that's
There's a Waldorf Astoria now.
It is now. It has
It
a
is.
very nice bar. I've been there multiple times.
Nathan, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
BTW.
BT Dubs. Thanks,
Stories
Nathan.
you may have missed here over the course of the week on the terminal and at Bloomberg.com, other outlets as well. We're coming up on 8 o'clock here in New York City.
That's right. The next hour of Bloomberg This Weekend starts right now.
Coming up on Bloomberg this weekend, strikes on hold. President Trump reverses course overnight, calling off a major escalation with Iran and promising a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Will that bring down the price of oil and gas?
More of our exclusive interview with 4 of the nation's governors. Their thoughts on affordability, elections, and the rapid growth of AI.
Data centers and AI at some level is a national economic and security imperative. We cannot let China win on this one.
And speaking of AI, the digital divide, how the use of ChatGPT and other AI agents is impacting our human relationships and dividing friends, family, and coworkers.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. It's 8 o'clock in New York from Bloomberg's World Headquarters. I'm David Gura.
I'm Christina Ruffini. We're bringing you the latest breaking news, reports, and analysis live this morning and every weekend, 7 to 10 a.m. And the big story this morning is a bit of a non-story. It's that a pause in those hostilities, those promised assaults from President Trump, saying he was going to hold Iran to account. And then this morning we hear that via Truth Social, as we often do in some other reporting, that they've put a pause on that due to the efforts of some Saudis and some other Gulf leaders trying to convince the president to wait on that. But also there could be other factors in there, including the markets and oil prices and what's been going on. Yeah,
our focus here very much on sort of what happened between that bellicose rhetoric at Camp David on Friday, between that and the Truth Social post that we got late last night. And then, of course, looking ahead to what might happen here in the days ahead as the president promises we have the, quote, perimeters of a deal.
That's right.
In the works. We'll dig into all of that,
of a previous tweet, kind of legendary one.
Yes, framework of a deal. Anyway, any number of analogies, any number of synonyms for that. We'll get into that in just a minute here, but first let's get to the headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Well, David, it is the top headline this morning. President Trump, as you say, says the U.S. will hold off on new strikes against Iran. That's as the president says the Islamic Republic and other Middle Eastern nations have told him they're working toward a deal. President Trump says Israel has also agreed not to strike, though Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office had no immediate comment on that. State-run media in Saudi Arabia are reporting that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman held a call with President Trump yesterday, urging dialogue to de-escalate tensions. 3 people are dead, 7 others injured in a shooting at an In-N-Out burger restaurant in Twin Falls, Idaho. Witnesses say a man with an AR-style rifle emerged from the drive-thru where another man fired at the gunman with a pistol. Twin Falls Police Chief Matthew Hicks says it was a chaotic scene.
We have literally hundreds of people that were in some way, shape, or form in the area of this restaurant at the time that are being interviewed right now. The resources for all of our agencies are completely on board.
Witnesses say the gunman fired at least 3 or 4 rounds before he was stopped. It's unclear if he was targeting anyone in particular. More than a dozen wildfires are burning across Washington state. The largest in Spokane County has forced evacuations from hundreds of homes and at least 1 hospital. Washington Governor Bob Ferguson has declared a statewide state of emergency.
This is an extremely difficult situation for many Washingtonians. I want them to know we're doing everything we can to get resources out as quickly as possible. We have been anticipating a situation like this. We've been mobilizing for some time.
The National Weather Service has issued its most urgent red flag warning, a particularly dangerous situation for much of eastern Washington and northeastern Oregon. A bombing at an upscale restaurant in Moscow, Russia, has left 3 people dead and 21 others hurt. Russia's anti-terrorism agency says the blast killed a security guard who tried to prevent an unidentified woman from bringing an improvised explosive device in a box inside the Balzi Rossi Italian restaurant. Now, the woman and a customer were also killed. Moscow's mayor is calling it a terrorist act, but he's not saying who was responsible. The U.S. has raised its travel advisory for Spain's North African enclave of Ceuta. The State Department says, quote, massive and uncontrolled arrival of migrants from Morocco may lead to unpredictable and dangerous security situations. Spain says more than half of the 50,000 people who illegally crossed the border this week have now left. At least 67 people died in that border breach. David and Christina.
Nathan, thank you very much. Appreciate that update. And I'm going to start here just by going back to that post that we mentioned just a moment ago from the president, which he fired off last night. He's saying the USA is locked and loaded and ready to go. His words, but he said the perimeters of a deal has been agreed to. I have agreed for the future benefit of the world and likewise the survival of a successful and prosperous Iran to cancel the attack, subject to being able to rapidly make a deal. We're fortunate to have Jeff Mason back with us here, Christina, on set in New York.
We're always fortunate to have Jeff Mason in our lives. Jeff, perimeters of a deal. We did some quick Googling while Nathan was talking. Concept of a plan was the Trump quote I was trying to come up with. It's all it's sounding a little familiar. I'm curious because you wrote earlier in the week talking about the confidence between the parties is at rock bottom. Iran saying the U.S. isn't trustworthy. The U.S. saying the same. We heard David reference this language from the president at Camp David less than 48 hours ago.
Right.
How have we moved to getting the president to hold his fire? What happened?
Indeed, and that's kind of the question that we can ask for, every week since the war started.
Maybe not every week
all
over again, but
there is,
yeah.
and I think there's a couple different factors to consider. Number one, the president is very sensitive to market reaction, and so if he did face a lot of lobbying from either people in the region or others, and determined that there was a reason to hold off, I can assure you that he will be very pleased to see the market reaction on Monday, which will no doubt be positive. Number two, he also still says we're locked and loaded, right? So pause again. He did a pause, not too long ago, and then Iran did not, from the U.S. point of view, did not respect that ceasefire and started firing again, and then so did the U.S. So I think there's a lot of TBD, but for now, what changed in the last 48 hours? He backed off.
I want to linger on the level of frustration he so evidently has with how this is progressing. And so going back to the piece that you wrote with Jen DeLuey just a little while ago, we really are at a position where I think he does want to get back to the negotiating table. Iran has said repeatedly they're not the ones who walked away. Your enticement isn't going to get us back to diplomacy. Talk a bit more about that, just sort of how this is clouding his ability to sort of see a path forward here. Yes, there is the bellicose rhetoric, there's the talk of military might, but really it seems like there is no clear path that will get these two sides together once again.
The factors really haven't changed much.
Yeah.
They haven't. Let's take a moment and get into President Trump's head, which is not that hard because...
We might need 2 moments.
I'm going to sit back. Okay.
He usually shares everything that's in his head
fair
with
point.
us so publicly, right? But one of the things I would say is, A, the president has made clear he wants to be seen as a historic president who took on an international challenge that other presidents have not. Number two, he thought it was going to be easier. And he's repeatedly talks about Venezuela and how quickly and successfully that went. He clearly thought that was what was going to happen with Iran, and it hasn't. But he's also worried about the economic impact of a prolonged war. Despite being dismissive when we ask him how long is this going to take, he'll talk about, well, this is nothing compared to Vietnam or Afghanistan. But he also has said out loud that he doesn't want to be someone who presides over a Great Depression. So all of those factors are no doubt going through his head as he determines whether or not to escalate, whether or not to give more credence to a country that he has publicly said he does not trust.
That seems such an odd argument to make, and we've heard it from the president multiple times now. This is not as bad as Iraq or Afghanistan. That's like saying don't think about the color yellow. Because if you compare what you're doing to these kind of failed conflicts, of course that's something people are going to talk about. I'm also wondering, Jeff, we've talked about who's kind of whispering in his ear as far as allies or regional partners. Who is involved in these decision makings in the national security apparatus? Because it's increasingly unclear to me what roles each person is playing. And maybe it's shifting. I don't know. You tell me. Where's Rubio? Where's Vance? Who's helping him decide?
Sure. So that cast of characters, I think, is largely the same. It was instructive to look around the table at Camp David. Steve Witkoff was there.
Yeah. Certainly
Vice President J.D. Vance was there. I do have some reporting I can share about that, though. I had a meeting with a White House official last week who was in Vice President Vance's orbit, and I referenced the fact that about 10 days ago I was in the Oval Office and I asked the president who's leading these talks, because he said then talks are continuing, and he said Vice President Vance. And I asked this official, has Vice President Vance been involved in any talks at all recently? And the official was unaware of any talks that the Vice President had been involved in. So I think that's telling. That doesn't mean talks aren't happening, but I'm not sure that the highest level officials, i.e. J.D. Vance, who the President has assigned to do this, has been involved.
So fascinating. And I remember that exchange because effectively the president said at the end, I'm going to paraphrase here, he's like, everybody's involved.
Right.
Tons of conversations are happening and everybody's involved. Look, you've covered this administration, you've covered the first Trump term. Is it coming from top down? Are the participants in those talks aware of what the president wants, or does it happen in the reverse? I'm just curious what kind of fundamental procedural sense as they're working toward a deal, where is the concept of the plan? Where are the parameters of the deal coming from?
Well, first of all, everything is top down.
Yep.
I mean, the president makes the determination on all of these things. And yet, specifically in this brief, I think he is getting reports back from those who are involved in the talks, whether we know exactly who that is. I think Kushner and Woodcock continue to be very closely aligned with it or involved in it. But he's getting reports and then making his decisions. But surely, as we've seen on lots of policy issues, but clearly this one, which is really the most important one for him right now, he's the one who decides.
Jeff Mason, White House correspondent up here in New York. You going to come back soon?
Sure. All right. Good to be with you guys.
Good to see you, Jeff.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see you.
We're going to turn now to the former U.S. ambassador to Israel, who's have a number of times here during the course of this conflict. Tom Nides is familiar to many of you viewers as vice chairman of Blackstone. We're talking to him in his capacity as a longtime public servant. And I think last we spoke, Tom, you were in Israel. Good to catch up with you once again. And I want to start with you in this post from the president as well. There's a line in it at the end here that the country of Israel joins me in the commitment the president has made here to take a pause, not to pursue more aggressive military action at this point. I'm curious what your latest read of this conflict is. We were talking just a moment ago about how stuck things seem to be, the frustration the president has with that. How do you read where things stand right now?
Well, first of all, I'm a little bit concerned about following your bougie water segment prior to this. So hopefully I'll be a little bit more...
And thank you for watching.
I watched it. I saw it. So I'm not sure I can afford $4 water, but I'll work on that. So let's step back for a minute. Listen, first of all, my hope is that the escalation of this stops, because clearly the president knows, and quite frankly, the Iranians know, that the only solution here is a diplomatic solution. So what is for sure we all understand is a military solution on its own won't work. And I think that the president, as he begins to continue to be in this bit of a cul-de-sac in which we hit Iran hard, they hit our U.S. targets hard. Our allies don't like it. Oil prices continue to go up. So he finds himself in a very untenable situation. The unfortunate part about the Iranians know that. And so as someone who has spent time dealing with the Iranian negotiations, I understand they're quite smart, contrary to what many people think. The negotiators, some of the same negotiators that we dealt with in 2015, they understand the president does not want to escalate this if he can avoid it. And they're pushing the president to the brink. And I think ultimately the president is going to attempt to try to get a diplomatic solution.
I think is this a Truth Social that just posted that we've been sent from the control room? It looks... Oh, I'm sorry. This is a quote from Rubio talking about regime change, because that's another thing that we heard kind of at the onset of this conflict was a goal from the White House, saying that they wanted to do a regime change. And we're still hearing that. We had some folks last week saying, as more and more pressure gets put on the population, there is this hope that they will rise up against the regime. But I wanted your take on whether or not that's anything but aspirational at this point, because you have a regime that even the administration has admitted is willing to endure extreme pain and doesn't really care how much of the pain goes onto the population. They also seem more entrenched than ever. And if you have a beleaguered, starving, and concerned population, folks I've spoken to, a family in Tehran, say their family's not even there anymore. They're in the mountains. They're trying to get out of the way from these assaults. Is regime change really a viable option at this point?
This is not going to happen. The reality of this is that as much as all of us would like to see it happen, and someone who's spent a bunch of time in different administrations, there are 90 million people who live in Iran. The Iranian regime is basically organized by 1 million strong IRGC officials. Listen, could things get worse for the people in Iran, and could they rise up? Sure. But I think ultimately today, contrary to what the Prime Minister of Israel was telling the president, and the president's desire to see a regime change, that today is not happening. And I think everyone understands that to be fact. Would we like to happen? Would we like this to be Venezuela? Some people would think, sure, why not? But it's not a world of practical. What's practical is to get the Iranians back to the table, try to get the Straits of Hormuz back open. To be clear, it was open before the war started, getting it back open, attempt to try to get our inspectors inside Iran. And to be clear, I've said this multiple times before, if tomorrow President Trump was delivered the agreement that we actually negotiated in 2015 and said, Mr. President, here is the deal that you could sign today. I believe, and to be clear, that deal was not perfect. With the JCPOA, it was not perfect. I bet you a lot of money that the president would be more than happy to sign that agreement. That is not happening. We're not going back to that agreement. So my view of this is we need to understand the only way this is going to get solved is a negotiation with the parties involved and our allies involved, including the Saudis, the Qataris, the Kuwaitis, yes, the Pakistanis, and try to get this deal done. That will solve this at least for the short term.
Tom, we had David Remnick of The New Yorker on the show yesterday. We're talking about the war, talking about Gadi Eisenkot and sort of the political situation in Israel. And he brought up an interesting point, which is Benjamin Netanyahu needs this war to continue politically. President Trump couldn't wait for it to end. He wants to see it end as quickly as he can see it end here because of the political considerations he has here in the U.S. I look at this reporting by Dan Lamothe in the Washington Post, the head of European Command privately warning the Pentagon this week he lacks sufficient naval forces to continue protecting Israel from incoming ballistic missiles, sent a message to that effect to the Pentagon. I'm curious if you agree with what David said, what David Remnick said there, the way in which Israelis are still behind this war and how they're watching what's happening here with the President of the United States.
Well, first of all, Dave's a great journalist, so obviously I too share a lot of his views. However, I think here's what's happened here. Obviously, I know the Prime Minister, obviously, yes, he's in the middle of an election, which is happening in October. The problem is the Israeli people are upset. Both the liberal Jews and the conservative Jews, they were told that this war, there was a price to be paid, but the benefits would be substantial to the Israeli people. And unfortunately, for right or for wrong, good or for bad, that hasn't come through yet. There's still, they've spent an enormous amount of anxiety up north in Israel. Just 2 weeks ago, multiple concerns about going back and in and out of shelters. Clearly the war has not subsided. We still have these proxies going on. So the Israeli people are disappointed. And you know what happens when voters are disappointed? They go and voice that anxiety against the leadership. So the prime minister is, in fact, suffering from that right now. Mm-hmm. Who knows what happens in the election? Obviously, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and as you know. But at the end of the day, the prime minister's got himself in what the British would call a sticky wicket. Uh-huh. He would obviously like to see how I threw that in there, guys? But I think does he want the war to continue? I think he wants to prove to the Israeli voters that he has got this under control and he's working on their behalf. Right now, he has not accomplished that.
Tom, always great to speak with you. Thank you very much. That's Ambassador Tom Nides joining us here on this Sunday morning. Appreciate you joining us.
Send you some of that water.
Yes,
thank you, President.
We'll send a case your way.
Well, let's not get crazy. All right, coming up, what are the top issues facing voters this election? We asked 4 of the nation's governors an exclusive interview, plus their strategy to address concerns over, what else? AI data centers. That's straight ahead on Bloomberg This Weekend.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Nathan Hager. Let's update you now on today's top stories. Ukraine struck a Rosneft oil refinery in Russia's Saratov region overnight as Kiev continues a near daily series of attacks on Moscow's fuel industry. Officials say Ukraine also struck an airfield more than 600 miles east of Kyiv, which Ukraine says has been used to launch cruise missile strikes. Now, regional authorities say 2 people were killed in today's attack in Russia. A ferry caught fire while at sea in Indonesia today, leaving 5 dead and 41 others missing after some of them jumped overboard. Officials say 225 people on that vessel have been rescued. They say 4 ships were on standby near the ferry, but they couldn't approach because of the risk of flammable material aboard. A plane carrying European tourists crashed outside the Peruvian city of Nazca, killing 13. That group was on its way to view the famed Nazca lines. Those are expansive geoglyphs that Peru's indigenous population carved into the desert hundreds of years ago. The airline involved has offered scenic flights over the landmark for more than a decade. And Hungary is shutting down its only nuclear plant due to a record low Danube River. The country's new prime minister says a shortage of water to cool the PAX facility has it operating at just over a tenth of its 2,000 megawatt capacity. It's the first time this Hungarian nuclear plant has shut down in its 44-year history. A sustained drought continues across Central Europe. Christina and David.
Nathan, thank you very much. Appreciate it. More now from our exclusive sit-down interview with the heads of the National Governors Association. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, 2 10-gallon hats between the 4 of them, joining Bloomberg this weekend on Saturday to announce a bipartisan task force designed to tackle immigration reform.
I will say they did share the hats in our previous clip. Governor Spencer Cox of Utah, Wes Moore of Maryland, Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma, and Matt Meyer of Delaware. Take a listen.
We get elected. We always say that the governors really can't be that partisan because potholes aren't partisan. We actually get judged by what we accomplish. We get held accountable for that. So unlike Congress, we have to do those things. And there's this cool thing. We're celebrating America 250, but the way our country was set up, the most of the power was left to the states, not to the federal government. That's certainly changed over the years. Unfortunately, we think that that's one of the problems. But here's I think why this really matters and should matter to all Americans. That is that we are the laboratories of democracy. So if a blue state comes up with a new policy that solves a problem in their state, I'm going to steal that. I want the best for my people. It goes the other way around. We were just talking about Mississippi today and their reading scores, the 3rd grade reading scores. They went from 49th to top 10.
Yeah, it was really remarkable.
And all of us looked around and said, "Hey, what is Mississippi doing? We should copy that." And so almost all of us, I think, have adopted some portion of Mississippi's policies around the science of reading. That's why governors and mayors are, I think, more popular. Why there's a little more trust, although we're all struggling with that right now. But we're lucky to have these events where we can get together and learn from each other.
I can tell you, I took it a step further where we saw what was happening in Mississippi. We didn't just copy the model. We actually stole their superintendent, who's now the superintendent in the state of Maryland. So it's now becoming the Maryland model.
I don't know if I want to encourage that. Governor Stitt, I'm wondering. No poaching people, guys. Everybody play nice in the sandbox. Governor Stitt, when you talk to constituents, what is the number one or 2 issues that they talk to you about? And have you found, when you go to the NGA, when you talk to your colleagues, that those are common pretty much across all the states right now?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, and every year I've been governor now for 8 years, and it hasn't changed. I mean, I believe that whether you live in rural Oklahoma or urban Oklahoma, you want the same thing. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, you really want the best education for your kids, the best opportunity. I want to make sure I put my kids in the best situation possible so they can chase their American dream. I want the best access to health care. I want the best roads and bridges and infrastructure and utility costs. And then I want the best economy. I want wages to growth. I want opportunities for upward mobility. And so those 4 things are non-political. And I always tell Oklahomans, hey, let D.C. play politics. We're all Oklahomans. Let's make Oklahoma top 10. And so I focus on those things. And I don't think it's any different when I meet with my colleagues around the country. They're dealing with the exact same things in their state. So it's those 4 things I always focus on.
People are starving for government that delivers, for people that delivers. There's so much nonsense out there, not just in politics and government, but everywhere. And I think people are just looking for people they elect to roll up their sleeves and get actual real work done to help educate their kids, deal with childcare. The costs, I have 3 kids, 1 more on the way, and the costs are skyrocketing. Making sure when you go and get gas, it's affordable. And so that's really what we're spending time on all day. You look at the national news and things people are fighting about. Most of what we do are kitchen table issues, just trying to make life a little bit easier for the people that live in our respective states.
I would just add the price of housing is a big piece of that. That's when we hear energy too. Yeah. All of the consumer costs. That's huge for all of us.
That's funny. I was actually just going to say, so obviously I'm here in New York. I moved here recently, and I talk about it on the show a lot. Everything here is insanely expensive, but I grew up in Colorado, and I was talking to a friend who has a very different life than me earlier this week, and she was saying the same things I was dealing with. She was like, we've gotten to a place in our lives we always wanted to be. My husband and I are making the money we always wanted to, and we feel like we can't afford even the basic things. So Governor Moore, I want to start with you, but what is your plan to tackle affordability? How are you going to tackle this? And then I brought it out to the group. What are you guys doing to bring these prices down?
Well, I think one thing that all the governors recognize is that, we wish we could control the price of gas, but that's not something that governors control. You know, we are seeing how nationwide the price of gas has just skyrocketed over the past 12 weeks. We see how, you know, we wish we could control the price of groceries. Unfortunately, we're now seeing how inflation is the highest that it's been in 3 years. And so you're watching the price of groceries continue to go up. And so there are certain factors that as governors, we don't control the fact that things continue to rise, but we can control the things we can control. So, for example, when we're talking about best practices that we have seen, and that as other states we've also brought on board, you know, we actually in Maryland, we passed legislation that deals with the issue of price manipulation at supermarkets, where, you know, supermarkets and big supermarket chains cannot use your data against you when you walk into a supermarket and increase the prices because they know that you will pay for the increased prices. So we were the first state to actually ban price manipulation. That when it came to things like rising energy prices that we're all wrestling with, you know, in our state, and I know other states have done the same, we've now put, you know, hundreds of dollars back in the pockets of our people in Maryland. You know, it's $300 million that we've now put back to the people of Maryland to deal with these rising energy prices. And so we're making sure we can control the things we can control, making historic investments in childcare, as Matt was talking about, because that is one of the largest costs that families are dealing with, where they're now having to choose between, are my kids going to be okay, or can I go back into the workforce? And so we're making sure as governors that while we cannot control a lot of the dynamics that are existing within our states, the things that we can control to make life a little bit easier for the people of our states, we can and we will.
Does anybody else want to get any other specific policies that y'all want to highlight that you are trying to do either on housing, or I know energy is a big concern, especially with data centers going in a bunch of places, food costs, childcare. Are there any other policies that come to mind that you're trying to enact in your states?
Well, you know, go ahead.
Well, I think we all want to jump in.
Sorry, yeah, I'm trying not to just keep going down the row, but you're grown-ups. You can figure it out. All right, thanks, guys.
Good. Go ahead. Well, I would just say on housing, we're all dealing with affordability. We want, you know, home ownership is so important. My whole career has been in the mortgage business and banking and promoting home ownership and strengthening families and how important that is to own homes. And so when you see that cost rising and you see people delaying housing, purchasing their first house till they're in their 30s now, what is that? Well, if you believe in economics, I believe it's a supply problem, right? So how do we get more houses built? Some of that is zoning problems. We're not allowing more developers. To me, it's always over-regulation, right? So we passed a bill to encourage zero interest loans to developers to develop more houses. And then for that, they had to produce affordable houses for the working families. The Build Act that we did allows developers now to burden the cost of utilities, infrastructure as far as water, sewage, instead of back onto the municipality. So we're doing everything we can to encourage more supply coming in. We're already very affordable in Oklahoma, and we're getting tremendous economic development. But we want more. We want to unleash the innovation of companies to go meet the demands of Americans, and I think that's the best policy, just a free market approach.
Governor Meyer, one of the big things that we were just talking about, one of the big costs is energy, and energy costs are really going up. And we're seeing that coincide, of course, with these big data centers that are going in all across the country. I'm wondering if you are hearing from your constituents that they are concerned about AI, they are concerned about the energy draw of these data centers, and what you're doing about that in your state.
I am hearing a lot. I think all of us are hearing a lot about data centers and the concerns about AI. They run the gamut from security concerns, privacy concerns, environmental concerns, and wealth inequality concerns. And I think each of us have a different approach. We're looking to attract employers in Delaware. In my first 18 months in office, we've been very successful doing that. But I've also been very clear that if you're gonna negatively impact our environment, if you're gonna increase ratepayers' energy bills by a single penny, then we're not gonna have you here. So we're putting in place rules. We're about to finalize, I'm about to sign some legislation that does just that, that says, hey, if you want a data center or anything like that in our community, you have to come with benefit for the community. I think a number of us are doing behind the meter policies where kind of bring your own energy. If you bring your own energy and you're not drawing from the grid, it's much easier to get a pathway. I think we all also understand that data centers and AI at some level is a national economic and security imperative. We cannot let China win on this one. We have to make sure that our respective states aren't blocking each other and blocking things so that we as a country cannot move forward.
All right, gentlemen, we're running a little short on time. I really appreciate you taking the time. Before I let you go, I do want to play a game. So if everybody could please raise your hand like this. Wait, I have to find my camera here. Put your hand up. We're gonna do put a finger down if. I'm sure you have children or have been on the internet and you understand how this works. All right, you ready? Please put a finger down if you are concerned about affordability in your state.
Put a finger down if you're concerned?
Yeah, if you're concerned about affordability in a state, put one of your fingers down. Please put a finger down if you have released a book in the past year or are planning to release a book in the coming year. All right, that's 2 out of the 4. Put a finger down if you're going to Iowa this year or in the next cycle. Iowa.
I think I might be on Iowa.
Meyer. He's in, the new guy.
Yeah.
The gentleman from Delaware has put a finger down. And finally, please put a finger down.
We're just going to New Hampshire.
New Hampshire also counts. Okay. New Hampshire also counts.
My wife likes to have a drink.
My final question of the day. Please put a finger down, gentlemen, if you are running for president in 2028. I'm looking. All right, no one committed. No one committed. Thank you for being good sports. I appreciate it. Thank you again. Good luck with the task force.
I have to say, though, I am the only one of this group who actually has a re-election in less than 100 days. So I'm sweating a whole lot more than my friends are here.
That's right. If it's a little hot, maybe one of your new friends can let you borrow a hat. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Have a great time at the Stockyards. We really appreciate you joining us today.
A lively time down there in Oklahoma.
You said you have a hat too.
All right. To chat or not to chat, that is the question facing many of us. How AI is dividing relationships among friends and family. That is coming up next on Bloomberg This Weekend, on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, Bloomberg.com, and the Bloomberg Business app.
Thanks for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Nathan Hager. Let's update you on today's top stories. Capital One Financial says it closed accounts in 2021 that belonged to President Donald Trump's real estate company. That's after an internal review by the bank's anti-money laundering team. The lender disclosed this in a filing late Friday to a judge asking to toss a Trump Organization lawsuit that accused Capital One of political discrimination after the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol. The filing does not accuse the president or his company of wrongdoing. The Los Angeles Dodgers have landed the biggest prize ahead of the MLB trade deadline, picking up 2-time reigning Cy Young winner Tarek Skubal from the Detroit Tigers last night. Of course, was the team that drafted Skubal in 2018 and turned him into a star. Now he joins a high-priced Dodger roster that already includes Shohei Ohtani, fellow 2-time Cy Young winner Blake Snell, and Mookie Betts. Vincent Pastore has died. The veteran actor played tough guys and mobsters, including the big gangster who ratted Tony Soprano out to the FBI on the long-running HBO series The Sopranos. Pastore's manager says he was found at his home in New York City Island after having not been heard from for a few days. Vincent Pastore was 80 years old. David and Christina.
Thank you. And for those of us who weren't here for the disclosure last hour that neither of you have watched The Sopranos, trust me, I'm working on it.
You're going to work on that. Do you have like the DVD set?
I will
VHS,
I will eBay those DVDs and we will make it happen.
Nathan, thank you very much.
Nathan.
Appreciate that. As artificial intelligence becomes ingrained in everyday life, disagreements over the technology are increasingly becoming disagreements over values.
In the latest Bloomberg Forecast newsletter, Bloomberg News contributor Josie Cox explores how AI adoption is dividing friends, families, and coworkers. Writing, researchers have only just begun to study AI's social consequences, and there's little empirical work examining whether attitudes towards technology are becoming part of people's identities. I have opinions about that, but I will leave them to the expert. But interviews with AI skeptics suggest that for some people, AI use has become a proxy for values.
Josie Cox joins us now. She's also the author, I should say, of the book Women, Money, Power, The Rise and Fall of Economic Equality. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with this disagreement. We can maybe nod to how popular this has become and how we're all kind of fumbling through it. I think we can acknowledge that. What did you find as you dug into this in terms of what the personal or interpersonal ramifications of this are thus far.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, everyone is familiar, of course, with the headlines of just the meteoric rise of AI. It's doing everything for us. It's in our work lives, our personal lives, in our bedrooms. It's everywhere. But what I have generally found really interesting is the ways in which it's exacerbating divides. Initially, I was reporting on the gender gap that it was potentially exacerbating. So I was
Are men more apt to use it?
They are more apt to use it. I did a story of Bloomberg a couple of years ago, really kind of in the sort of beginnings of AI dominance, showing that there was actually quite a stark divide between use rates among women and use rates among men. The gap has closed a little bit, but that really sort of planted the seed of interest. And I've since then I've been interested in ways in which AI is not only uniting us but also dividing us. And so this story really came from sort of anecdotal evidence and conversations that I was having with people in my life who were sort of vehemently anti-AI. And I just thought it was really interesting because a lot of people have different reasons for being anti-AI, for being sort of AI refuseniks, as I like to call them, be that the environment or ethical concerns, or in the creative industries, a lot of people are concerned about copyright, things like that. Yeah. But ultimately, they all sort of tend to kind of congregate around this idea of it being a bit of an identity, right? And it's sort of as I was reporting the story, I realized that it was almost tribal. It was like us versus them.
Interesting.
And I just think it's fascinating to kind of consider, as AI continues to dominate, continues to infiltrate our lives, what that will ultimately mean for workplaces, families, relationships, etc.
I am one of those people who gets very surprised by the people in my life who have started relying on AI so quickly, especially people my age. I'm like, guys, we've managed to make it our whole lives without having your computer tell you how to get on the subway or what to order at dinner. And the people who adopt it, even people in creative industries, people who it's threatening their livelihood, are adopting it in a way that I think counteracts all the rest of their values. Right. But I personally get really upset. I was at dinner the other day and we needed to Google something, and my friend picked up his phone and said, "Hey, chat," and I said, "Just Google it." But like, why do I care? You know what I mean? Like, why is it so emotionally investing?
I think one of the reasons it's so emotional is because a lot of the uses of AI that we're resorting to are to do with communication, right? And communication is something that is so personal. One of the academics who I spoke to, who's a sociologist and who kind of studies political divides, which is sort of a good corollary for this, said that there's a lot of AI skepticism around communications that should be personal, like wedding vows, right? Like birthday greetings.
Or
like
dating
emails.
apps. People are like having their dating apps just talk to each other.
Right.
The messages are completely AI generated now.
Right. And communication is one of the most personal things that we rely on, and one of the most sort of personal building blocks of our lives. So if we're relying on a machine to do that, what does that tell us about the state of humanity, quite frankly?
I'm stuck with this agentic setup that's happening.
Yeah, it's terrifying. They've like programmed, prompt responses because you don't have to go through this, but it is a quite exhausting process.
Anecdotally, it is a lot. On the subject of dating, you cite in your piece here a survey by the dating app Hilly. Pronounce that right?
I think so.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know that one.
64% of Gen Z, 56% of millennial daters say they would not date someone who relies on AI for everyday decisions. Here we do have some empirical evidence. At least there's a survey that's taken place here. We have some data here. But what does that tell you just about the way that lines are being drawn even preemptively, I think?
Yeah. Well, I think, to your point, empirical data is scant now.
Yes, even about, economic impact, all of that. We're kind of flying blindly through all of this.
Completely. I had to cast around for this, right? But I thought this was a really interesting data point. The other thing I should say about it is that this is, of course, people who are saying that they feel this way about AI, right? Whether they're actually acting on it is another thing. This is the same as, the perennial issue with political polling, right? But I think what it does tell us is that there is a bit of a backlash, right? Obviously, as we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, the rise has been absolutely meteoric. And I think that there is a sort of hankering for personal connection amid this AI era that we're all finding ourselves in. So I'm hopeful that we'll get more empirical data on this. Stanford is doing some good research on this. We also had I came across some data for the piece showing that skepticism or lack of trust in AI is rising at a pretty rapid clip globally, with some regional differences. But over the last sort of 3-4 years, distrust in AI has actually risen by about 10 percentage points, which is a remarkable rate of increase for anything, really. So, let's see what the next generation does and what the dynamics look like there.
Well, quickly before you let you go, I want to ask about that next generation, because I was surprised. I don't know if there's, again, research is scant, but is there an age difference with adopters as well? Because I noticed in my life, younger people have almost stronger anti-AI feelings than some of the older people in my life who are like, this is cool, I can do this thing. And then I noticed this week, LinkedIn now has an option where you can hit the little button and say, this looks like AI slop, because I think they were getting bombarded with things that people didn't like, and it was ruining the user experience.
Yeah, I think as ever with new technologies, it comes down to literacy, right? And the younger generations are individuals who grew up with the internet, right? They don't know a time before the internet. So maybe that sort of skepticism is a little bit more intuitive for them. But again, let's see.
I wanted to ask you lastly just about the difficulty of being a skeptic or a fuse-neck, as you put it. So you cite in the piece there are companies now that are incentivizing employees to use AI. And so even if you don't want to do it or don't think that it's going to help or be a positive thing, there is pressure now being placed on people to use it in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. There are large companies that are not only incentivizing employees to use AI, but actively almost forcing them to, right? Mandating it. And I think those are the skeptics who were least willing to speak to me, right? Because they think their job might be on the line, right? But I think that is where we see that's really concerning, right? If you're being forced to do something in your work, that becomes a productivity issue, that becomes an engagement issue. Ultimately, that could become a workforce issue.
Wow, it's a fascinating subject. I think it's one that we're all thinking about all the time, especially, I don't have kids, but I know trying to parent
it's in the water.
Has to be especially difficult. Like my dog doesn't know how to AI, so we're safe there. But Susie Cox, thank you so much.
Come back as you get more empirical
Please let us know
as well. I know we're the infancy of the story as well. So nice 100%.
To see you. Nice to see you as well. All right, coming up, we've talked about bougie water. We've talked about fancy hotels.
We have.
Guess what? Running, going luxe. Would you spend $350 for shorts? We're going to talk about the latest high-end exercise trend.
Evidently, a lot of people will spend the amount of money for running shorts.
I will absolutely not.
Okay. She's drawn a line. Take us
Amazon and TJ Maxx, baby.
You can watch the show on Bloomberg TV. You can listen to it on Bloomberg Radio. You can stream it at Bloomberg.com. And of course, you can find it on the Bloomberg Business app. Stay with us. Bloomberg This Weekend continues in just a minute.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Christina Ruffini with David Gura. Running is having a moment. An estimated 52 million Americans now say they run or jog regularly, and that is a new record.
And even though this is an activity that does not require more than shorts, shirts, shoes, running has become a big business. We talked to Lily Meyer about what's become a multi-billion-dollar industry. She's a retail reporter for Bloomberg. Lily, you write about how running has become a status symbol. When and how did that happen?
Yeah, I think, running has always been popular, but coming out of the pandemic, as run clubs regathered and began, more people joined and got into running.
Poonam Goyal, who works at Bloomberg Intelligence, told you that running has become kind of cultic. Describe that. I live in Brooklyn near the park. There are running clubs, I see groups, but it's more than that. It's become like a real way of life for a lot of people.
Yeah, the running club culture has exploded. There are now running clubs around everything, around different interests. And then there are dating apps where you can meet people through fitness. And so I think it's really become more of an identifier than it was in the past.
So it's become this kind of cult. How does that play out in terms of the way that people dress for it, what clothes they're buying for it, kind of what ancillary gear they're getting as a result of being runners, I guess, in a bigger sense?
Yeah, I think because it's become more social, people want to look good while they do it. If they're going to a run club that has a bar or meet up after, and then maybe they see someone they're interested in, they want to look good, or if they're doing it with their friends or want to make new friends. So I think it's become less of an activity you can do in your pajamas or in your old college t-shirt.
You talk to people who have become runners in recent years. Did they do it because of all of this kind of social complement, or is it something they kind of stumbled into as they got into running?
It was a mix. Some of them started doing it right out of the pandemic or started in the pandemic where that was something you could do to get outside and still social distance. So I think, most of the people I spoke to have picked it up in the last 3 to 4 years, some even less.
Let's talk a bit about what people are buying. a lot of clothing and a lot of expensive clothing. Like, what does that look like? Take us through the rack of what people are getting.
Yeah, so some of the people I spoke to who buy the more high-end running gear, one thing they'll buy is this brand Satisfy has these moth tags. Satisfy, yes. Which is a higher-end running brand. They have shirts that are $140. They have shorts that are $350, running vests that are $410. There's a brand District Vision that makes running sunglasses, Bandit, which makes all kinds of running gear.
Let me stick with Satisfy for a second. So there are these kind of moth hole shirts.
Yes.
Looks like a moth has chewed cotton.
Yes.
That is the goal, but it's not done in any kind of random way. There's like a method to the madness of it all.
So the holes are laser cut.
Laser cut.
They're laser cut, and the brand every few years will use athletes, have them run and analyze their sweat patterns and make these laser cut holes based on where runners sweat.
As people are buying this, are they doing it with performance in mind? Are they thinking, yeah, it's cool that they've done this like analysis and laser cut, or is it because it looks cool? What did they tell you?
I think it's because it looks cool. I mean, I think, they perform well, and they're also cotton, which is interesting. So they're not in, a dry fit fabric. But I think it is because it looks cool, and someone told me, I can wear it while I run and then show up at brunch and I still look good.
Something I found fascinating is you talked to a number of these runners who spent like $3,500 or $5,000 on clothes, and that's like exclusive of shoes. What was their reaction to kind of like doing that math and figuring that out? Were they at all surprised like how much of an investment they'd made in this?
Yeah, it was funny talking to people, they'd be like, okay, let me think. Oh, it's $5,000.
It's like a sizable amount of money, yeah.
So, I mean, I think for some people it is expected, but I think for a lot of people, they're like, oh, it adds up. And I mean, I would never want to be asked how much money I spend on clothing. So, but I think it does add up in a way that maybe it wouldn't have in the past shopping at some of the less expensive brands.
You cover retailers here at Bloomberg, and I'd love to know sort of what this has meant for the retail economy surrounding running. Like what are stores seeing in terms of traffic and sort of how much people are willing to spend on shorts and shirts and socks and the like?
I think it depends on the brand. So running at Nike is still doing really well. And, Nike, most of Nike's products are not priced at the higher end.
The high price point, yeah.
Yeah, they have a few products that, are more technical and go for more. But running is still doing well at brands that offer more affordable running gear. But brands like Satisfy are seeing people spend more and are growing as well.
You mentioned Bandit a moment ago. People are paying money to kind of get early offers from Bandit. What does that say to you just about that brand's attitude toward consumerism? Sort of who's getting locked into deals like that?
It's interesting. I mean, I think it feels like that drop culture that we see in sneakers is expanding to other categories. So people, want the coolest thing. They want to get it before other people. They want to make sure they can get it. So I think, that pull that you can get clothes sooner and also get access to deals and get free socks is really enticing for shoppers.
Let me end with like a more existential question. That is, I think of running as like a sport that super egalitarian, anybody can get into. You just need like shoes and socks, shirt and shorts. This is changing all of that, I guess. There's kind of like a barrier that's being put in place here because of the kind of new coolness of running that wasn't there before.
Yeah, I mean, I think many people are probably still running in old shirts and shorts and not spending a ton of money. Yeah. I'm one of them. But even myself, I've, started to see these things and think like, okay, this is like cooler than what I'm running in. Like maybe I should get into it. So I think, we might start to see people spending more, and people have been.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend, live from New York with David Gura, Christina Ruffini, and Lisa Mateo. The latest headlines, key analysis, big interviews, and the stories that hit home on your days off.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend. We're coming to you live from Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York. I'm Christina Ruffini.
I'm David Gura. It is Sunday, August the 2nd. A busy morning. We were kind of anticipating perhaps some military activity over the course of the weekend, in part because of what we saw in the Wall Street Journal, what we saw at Camp David on Friday, an indication that the president was going to pursue more military action against Iran.
And the region was bracing for it.
Yes,
we were talking to people saying, buckle down,
that.
embassies were on alert, everybody was ready for it, and then...
Well, we got this post last night.
Truth Social
post
saying it's on hold for now due to some regional efforts by some partners, but that doesn't really solve the larger issues. Yes, it's on pause, but the fundamental facts have not changed. So even if these two parties can get to the table, first of all, they have to decide when they're doing it, how they're doing it, who's sitting around that table, which are all big ifs. But can this really be worked out, given that the facts on the ground have not really changed?
We're back into concept of a plan, territory perimeters of a deal. Nathan Hager in for Lisa Mateo on this Sunday morning to get us up to speed here on all the headlines. Nathan.
As you say, David and Christina, President Trump indeed says he has ordered the U.S. military to hold off on new strikes against Iran. That's as he says the Islamic Republic and other Middle Eastern nations have agreed to the parameters of the deal in a Truth Social post overnight. Now, the president had threatened to hit Iran, quote, very hard as late as last Friday. Saudi state-run media are reporting that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia urged dialogue on a call with President Trump yesterday. A shooting at a fast food restaurant in Twin Falls, Idaho has left 3 people dead, 7 others hurt. This happened yesterday afternoon at an In-N-Out burger drive-thru. Twin Falls Police Chief Matthew Hicks says hundreds were in the area at the time.
We believe that the threat to the community is over. The suspected shooter in this incident is deceased. He was nearby on the scene there, and we are working to try to ascertain his identity and the motivations behind that. We'll be able to figure that out in the next coming days.
Witnesses say the gunman came out from that drive-thru with an AR-style rifle, and another man with a pistol fired at the shooter. City officials say the suspect's body was found in an area near that In-N-Out. More than a dozen wildfires are burning across Washington state. The biggest is the Old Trails fire near Spokane, where large parts of the county are under mandatory evacuation orders. Spokane Mayor Lisa Brown is urging residents to heed the warnings.
We're not in a place right now where we can talk about the magnitude of the property destruction, but it is a very dangerous situation.
And the National Weather Service has issued its most urgent red flag warning, particularly dangerous situation for much of eastern Washington, as well as northeastern Oregon. A bombing at an upscale restaurant in Moscow, Russia, has left 3 dead and 21 others hurt. Russia's anti-terrorism agency says that blast killed a security guard who tried to prevent a woman from bringing an improvised explosive inside a box to that Italian restaurant. The woman and another customer were also killed in the blast. Moscow's mayor is calling it a terrorist act. He's not saying who might be responsible. And the U.S. has raised its travel advisory for Spain's North African enclave of Ceuta. The State Department says, quote, massive and uncontrolled arrival of migrants from Morocco may lead to unpredictable and dangerous security situations. Spain says more than half of the 50,000 or so people thought to have illegally crossed the border this week have now left. At least 67 died in this week's border breach. David and Christina.
Nathan, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Nathan. All right, as we mentioned, President Trump announced he would hold off on striking Iran as long as a deal with the Middle East nation is reached quickly. Writing on social media this morning, in part, quote, we have just been asked by Iran and other Middle Eastern countries to hold off any attack in the perimeters of a deal have been agreed to. This would include immediate, complete, and total opening of the Strait of Hormuz and an end to Iran's nuclear threat. Based on this request, I have agreed for the future benefit of the world and likewise survival of a successful and prosperous Iran to cancel the attack, subject to being able to rapidly make a deal.
Joining us now is Bloomberg White House correspondent Jennifer DeLuey. Jennifer, great to have you with us here on this Sunday. Let's start here and pivot to domestic matters, but what is the latest read, sort of what happened here in terms of the president's thinking, his decision here not to go ahead with this attack, which, as we mentioned at the top of the show, was something he telegraphed doing on Friday at that cabinet meeting televised live from Camp David?
Right. Well, I mean, this episode, with Friday's reports of the U.S. weighing new strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure, and as you noted, that the president's own comments at that cabinet meeting giving way to that Truth Social post last night saying he'd hold off, really kind of illustrates, that the limited position he's in 6 months into this war. He's increasingly boxed in. He has limited options to resolve this conflict. Further escalation and threats of it risk surging costs for fuel and other consumer goods, even as he's trying to address that before the midterm elections. And of course, he faces pushback from U.S. allies in the region with the idea of further escalation. You know, they are concerned about their own potential casualties in a widening war. Now, you know, Trump did also say, as you noted, that the parameters of a deal had been agreed to, including concessions on Iran's nuclear capability and its control, really, of the Strait of Hormuz. But of course, we have heard the president say such things before. It has not been echoed in Iranian media. And, you know, we've already seen one such agreement, the memorandum of understanding that led to that brief ceasefire, dissolve as this conflict proves increasingly intractable.
We talked in the last hour a little bit about the kind of shifting goals of this conflict from the beginning, and I want to play you some sound from Secretary of State Marco Rubio talking about regime change, because this wasn't a goal, then possibly was a goal, and now looks increasingly unlikely. Let's have a listen.
The regime change has never been the goal, though. As you say, it has been denuclearization. Can you have one without the other, though?
I think the regime has to change. You may not have regime change, but the regime has to change. The Iranian regime traditionally has been expeditionary. In essence, their view is they don't want to just govern Iran, they want to govern the region. They want to export their revolution. That does have to change. And the only way you're going to change that is if you make the price of it too high for them to be able to pay.
Increasingly, it seems like if you're looking at who's going to outlast a painstaking run on their population, and you're looking at a group of people in Iran who don't have to run for president, and President Trump, as November gets closer and closer and those gas prices stay high, who wins this battle, even just in the press when it comes to the domestic audience? Because it seems like the president wants to end this as quickly as possible, and Iran has seen this play out before with the U.S. and with other big nations bogged down in these conflicts. Sometimes they can outlast even the Soviet Union and even the United States in like Afghanistan and Iraq.
I mean, you've nailed it. These are the political pressures that the president is facing, and they're very real, especially as those November elections get close. He has said, many times, most notably overseas, he said, he didn't want to be compared unfavorably, in the annals of history. He was concerned about economic repercussions, global economic damage. So he's kind of laid those cards out on the table. And of course, he's subject to a political election cycle that, the Iranian leaders, certainly leaders in Tehran, are not. That's clearly an issue here in the strategy going forward. Of course, it's worth noting that the president has also, countered his own concern by saying, look, the nuclear weapon capability is something I need to make sure they don't have, and has diminished at times his concern about economic concerns as well, or his concern about the economy.
Jen, let's wander down Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House, past the Justice Department, very much in focus here on this Sunday morning as well. I guess we could go to the U.S. Attorney's Office on the heels of that, too. In fact, let's start there. We had this announcement from Jeanine Pirro, former Judge Jeanine Pirro, now the U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., that her office is no longer going to pursue charges against this former Olympian.
Oh, I wanted to ask this question.
Well,
all right.
Alleged here initially by her office that he had been guilty of vandalism in what had happened to the reflection pool. She, stepping back from that, saying that she and her prosecutors in her office, unaware of information that the Department of the Interior had here, pulling that indictment. Then we have a message from President Trump, another message that we're going to cite here from President Trump overnight on Truth Social. I disagree 100% with Jeanine Pirro. I don't know what she was thinking, the president writes. There may have been some contractor difficulty, but the major damage was caused by vandals. We don't have to get into the intricacies of this unless you want to do that, but help us understand the broader point here. This is a rare thing to see a member of his administration, a trusted advisor to the president, kind of coming out against him here, and then the president pushing back pretty vociferously here on social media.
Yeah, that is absolutely why this moment is notable. I mean, the president has been able to keep quite a tight leash and control on the Justice Department during his second term, despite its decades-long tradition of independence. And of course, he's been able to keep a tight control on top members of his cabinet and his administration. And here you are seeing this very rare pushback with Pirro saying, look, the evidence says this is not vandalism. This was a botched installation job. There was a a little bit of sunlight in the president's truth on this yesterday when he acknowledged there may have been some contractor difficulty. But then, of course, he doubled down, as did his own Interior Secretary, and insisting this was really vandalism, not bad installation.
That's right. I have that tweet up right here. Secretary Doug Burgum saying the evidence is clear. Vandals have repeatedly caused damage to the reflecting pool, and going on from there, talking about the president cares a lot about protecting our sacred monuments, and his leadership has restored the nation's capital by making D.C. safe and beautiful again. But Jen, I do think it's interesting, this pushback from the U.S. Attorney's Office. And if you think it's symptomatic of anything else, folks I talked to over at DOJ have been kind of overwhelmed by trying to navigate these cases that they're being pushed by the White House that don't have a lot of weight to them. They don't have the facts. I think about Sandwich Guy. I don't know if you remember the guy who threw the Subway sandwich at the National Guardsman on U Street in D.C. Who was the jury nullification. They were dismissed, the charges, but they did have to expend all that energy. People are working pretty hard on all these. Is there something else going on here, or do you think this is a one-off?
It's hard to see it as a one-off because we're seeing it not just with the DOJ, but in other elements of the Republican Party. I would say, this case is unique and interesting in that Jeanine Pirro went out so very strongly. She held a press conference right after the initial reports of vandalism. So she really leaned into what Trump claimed was vandalism at the start. And I think that's what makes this one particularly notable and remarkable, this retreat from that position in these legal filings. But then, of course, you do have, the president brushing up against members of his own party as he tries to get his acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, fully confirmed over in the Senate. And so we're seeing, pockets of resistance that this president in his second term just hasn't experienced that much.
I want to go to the Justice Department now. And so this roiling debate has been over Todd Blanche, currently Deputy Attorney General, nominated to be the Attorney General fully. Of course, what's holding that up is the protestation of John Cornyn, Tom Tillis, over this weaponization fund that was established as part of a settlement from the president and his family. It seemed like that was dead. It seemed like there was a chance this could move forward. Then over the course of last week, that was walked back. And I look here I'll quote here from the New York Times. President Trump said on Saturday that he would revive a proposal for a $1.8 billion so-called anti-weaponization fund that would compensate his supporters if the Senate does not confirm his nominee for Attorney General. Jen, what is your latest read of the state of play on all of this? You have Tom Tillis saying he hopes all of this gets sorted out by Tuesday of this coming week. There is some eagerness among lawmakers, I think, to enjoy their summer recess so much as they'll be able to do so. But this is another instance, it seems, of an about-face by the president that I think is really complicating matters for lawmakers, certainly.
Absolutely. I mean, despite Tillis's hopes of a resolution by that Tuesday committee meeting that's crucial to get the nomination to the full Senate for consideration, it's hard to see a pathway, especially given that the president has gone from, saying this thing is dead to on Friday saying, but I wish it wasn't. And then yesterday saying, I'd actually like to codify it in law. This thing being, of course, the anti-weaponization fund. As you noted, there's also this issues around the immunity deal that has been brokered. Our reporting indicates that the president, the White House rather, has been unwilling, and the DOJ has been unwilling to accept some limits on the sweeping nature of that immunity deal. So that's tied up here, but as long as the president is digging in, doubling down on this and saying, he's not going to abandon it. But what's more, he's actually going to try to push for it to be created in much stronger ways. It's hard to see that creating a pathway for Blanche, Tillis, and Cornyn have been very clear they want to see these changes. And of course, that Tuesday vote looms very large.
Jen, a quick follow-up on this. We see this administration having so many acting officials across government, and I'm curious what difference it makes whether or not Todd Blanche is confirmed to the job permanently. He's serving in that capacity now. Why does it make a difference, if at all?
Yeah, Blanche is a little bit different than some other acting positions because he's already been confirmed, just not to this position. Yeah. He could essentially stay in the acting role, and for quite a long time. He might have to be renominated in the new year. And there's a concern that, decisions he takes while acting Attorney General could be legally challenged because he hasn't been formally confirmed to that role. So there is some legal risk, of course, for on a day-to-day basis. He can continue doing much of the work he would do even if he was fully confirmed.
All right, Jen Dlouet covering the White House for us this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Always nice to see you.
We're going to bring in a member of Congress now. That's Jonathan Jackson. He's the representative of the 1st Congressional District in Illinois, serves on the Foreign Affairs and Agriculture Committees in Congress. Great to have his perspective on this Sunday morning. Congressman, thank you very much for being here. We were talking about kind of domestic matters through the prism of what's happening in Washington, D.C. You might have heard us talking about the fight over Todd Blanche's nomination. Before that, we were talking about this reflecting pool, and maybe we can start there. Not in the remit of foreign affairs or agriculture, but one I know that you have strong opinions about. Your sense of sort of what's transpired here over the last 72 hours, say, we had the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia walking back an indictment that she'd put against a former Olympian who was accused of vandalizing that reflecting pool. And now overnight, the president saying, no, in fact, that's not the case. He still believes that this was vandalism at play, and presumably that this individual still needs to be prosecuted. Your reaction to that as somebody whose gaze I know is out on the National Mall and at the reflecting pool from time to time during the course of a week.
You're funny. That's good. This is just awful that the president obviously needs some help. He's being ill-advised and ill-served by the people that are closest to him. And to tell you, I don't know where the money's coming from. It's not being appropriated by Congress. I don't know where the gold leaf on the statues is coming from, where this no-bid contract comes from for a convicted felon that was engaged in bribery with elected officials. And it had already been redone under the Obama administration. The pool is too heavy, it had been, and so they raised it up so it wasn't so much water. It's sitting on top of a swamp, and literally that's what the geography was. And so now they're redoing that. How do you tear down a historic landmark? How do you tear down a building without a permit? Like, who pulled the permit in the East Wing? Where's this $1 billion and there are cranes up over the East Wing now to lay down the infrastructure? He said that was private donations. There's just no supervision, no oversight. But I would tell you that we're all bearing the cost of this haphazard administrative action. And if you're looking at Gibson coming in for drywall that's coming from Mexico, if you're looking for appliances that are from Asia, if you're looking at copper that goes into your house coming from Peru and Chile, that we're all paying for these tariffs that he has still imposed, that was done without the consent of the Congress. And we still have this blockade going on and a war in our hemisphere that is really undiscussed and underrated, but is going to have dire consequences if we don't reverse this immediately. In Cuba and in Venezuela, there's still sanctions on Venezuela after we've taken the country over. I don't understand this.
I think we do want to get your take on what's happening this morning with Iran and the Middle East because you're foreign affairs experience. But I know you did just go on a congressional trip that included Haiti and Venezuela. I've been to Haiti a couple times. The last time I went was the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, when the situation there had calmed just enough for us to touch down and then take off incredibly quickly, because even with all that security, they were very concerned. So I'm wondering what the security situation was there. And then I'm also reading that 300,000 Haitians in Florida who had TPS visas, that's temporary protective status, came after that 2010 earthquake. Those visas are about to be pulled. The Trump administration is saying it's time for them to go home. It's safe for them to go home. Is that even possible? Should they be sent home?
No, we have still advisory and warnings about American citizens going into Haiti. The Haitian community cannot absorb the persons that are being expelled on temporary protective status. We have 350,000 people, they say they're going to be immediately affected, that are Haitians. Half of those will convert over to citizenship. 180,000 are going to be in dire straits to go back to Haiti. They don't have the infrastructure, the housing, or anything. Also, we're going to lose nurses, primarily in Florida and New York and Boston, people that are very productive, and doctors, teachers, educators that are doing great things. The direct payments going back to Haitians from the United States in remittances is over $3.5 billion. With cash and remittances, it's almost 50% of their economy is going to 13 million people. That money goes away when you have those people to stop sending money back home. On average, they're making $800 a year in Haiti. It's the highest discrepancy between DR and Haiti in the entire world of income, $11,000, $12,000 to $800. And so we're going to compound the problem of the largest nation in the Caribbean of 13 million people. And so it was poorly conceived, erratically done, and just morally bankrupt to send these people back home.
I want to pick up on the other part of that trip. That was to Venezuela. And I think, we should note here, it's been a long time since a member of Congress has made a trip to Venezuela. So no small thing to have a CODEL touching ground in Caracas. But we got some news this morning that Venezuela's government and some opposition members formally launching a U.S.-backed political dialogue that could establish the terms for future democratic elections in that country. We know, as you know, President Trump says the country's not ready to hold elections, much to the chagrin of Maria Corina Machado and others who might run in that election when and if it takes place. Your sense of the appetite for it, your sense of this current government, this interim government's willingness to engage in a process that would lead to elections in the months ahead?
Well, I believe that the Venezuelan government, they're full speed ahead, that they would like to go for with the elections, but it's a matter of timing. The president has not pulled Machado to the table. And so the opposition is still, they are unified. They want to participate. We kind of have a third seat at the table, which makes this all the more complicated, that the United States is dictating the terms and policies. Their cash is on reserve from the sale of their oil at the United States Treasury. Members of the Congress, we don't know what disbursements have been made. It's a very opaque process, if you will. And so you got a president that doesn't have access to their funds of their oils that are being sold, and who's making the money off the brokerage fees. And so they can't prioritize as a nation what they want to do. Should they enhance their energy grid, which is in dire straits? Should they be able to put more money into which oil projects? It just can't be a bonanza of U.S. oil companies and interests running down there to try to get contracts without any local involvement and local participation. They're a sovereign nation. They have a right and a will to live under their own sort of governance. And we're like superimposing our will on it. So I think it's very fragile. I know the people are moving along with their life. We still have sanctions on a country that we have taken the president out of. And so we would like to have a press conference. I'd like to see more of Secretary Rubio's presence on this so we can hear his voice and see what the vision is. We've got a president that is now from Venezuela that's in U.S. custody in New York City. On the day he was arrested, they said he was the head of a drug cartel organization that no one knew about. And now, if you look at the most current reports, that cartel is said to no longer exist. So I'm sure some of those charges are going to get dropped. We just need some transparency and normalcy out of this administration.
Carson, because we don't get to focus on this part of the world a lot, I think we're going to stay here for our last question. And you're talking about wanting to know more about what the vision is for Venezuela, what the transparency is there on the policy. You were in Cuba earlier this year. I want to ask you directly, do you think President Trump plans to invade Cuba?
I absolutely believe he plans on invading. He telegraphs his punches. They keep talking about it. We are now currently at war with Cuba. That's not an inflammatory statement. If you have a naval blockade where you stop the import or export of goods, that's an act of war. So neighboring Caribbean countries cannot give oil to their Cuban neighbor because we, as the United States, have some hostilities with them. So we have economically asphyxiated this island nation of over 10 million people. We've seen early childhood deaths and infant mortality is beginning to rise. We've seen their cancer, which they were very good at detecting early on, is now beginning to rise. They're getting more people in stage 3 and 4 because they're not able to do the early detection. They cannot get basic human supplies. And even as we talk about the Caribbean, these boat strikes are illegal. There have been several people of Colombian descent that have been killed by these airstrikes, double taps, whatever, no quarters that Mr. Pete Hegseth is talking about. And then with Venezuela, we have their cash on our accounts and have not been able to let the president disperse her funds according to her priorities and go on state television says what she wants to do. So yes, the Caribbean, we should be focused on. It's at home. It's a hotbed issue. From Caracas, Venezuela to Chicago is 2,300 miles. People have walked up here. I've spoken to people that have been on bicycle, train, boat, train and walking in cars and smugglers. We've got 35,000 Venezuelans that came to Chicago in the last 2 years. And so it's one body, it's in our hemisphere. Cuba is 90 miles off the coast of Miami. Haiti is almost 400 miles off the coast. Unless we get there and help rectify those issues, they're coming here. You've not seen an migration issue crisis. This will be a manufactured one if we don't step in front of it.
All right, the gentleman from the 1st Congressional District in Illinois. Congressman, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it on this Sunday.
Thank you so much. All right, this week, voters in 7 states will head to the polls for primary elections. Starting Tuesday, Michigan, Missouri, Virginia, Kansas, and Washington State. Tennessee holds its primary Thursday, and Hawaii is on Saturday.
Well, much of the nation's attention has focused on the Great Lakes state, Michigan's Democratic Senate primary. With us now from Detroit, Bloomberg opinion columnist Ron Brownstein. Nancy Kaffer with us as well. She's the editorial page editor for the Detroit Free Press. Nancy, let me start with you. Today, as I understand, the last day for early voting in the state of Michigan, and I look at the number from the Secretary of State's office. More than 1 million voters have cast their ballots already. Just underline for us here the importance of this race, yes, for Michiganders, but for Democrats across this country as well.
You know, the control of the Congress, I think, runs through Michigan here. We've got a hugely consequential Senate race that's going to tell us a number of things. We've got progressive candidate Abdul El-Sayed, far more centrist candidate, U.S. Rep. Haley Stevens. So there's two sort of ideological choices Democrats face, but we're also facing a test of what exactly money can do in a primary. Representative Stevens has $52 million in outside spending in this race. And it's a 12-to-1 spending advantage over El-Sayed, who has, I think, a stronger ground game, more of an organic kind of viral support. And so we're looking at not just a choice in ideology, but then how money can communicate that ideology or the desirability of each candidate to voters.
I mean, Ron, I'm wondering what your take is on that, because we talk a lot about how money doesn't always equate to votes. We see a lot of times, especially candidates spending their own money on races. That's almost never successful, even though that's not necessarily the case here. But give us a rundown. Compare and contrast these two candidates for us, if you will. Who's supporting whom? And I mean, the polls are not that close at the moment. The latest Michigan Democratic Senate poll has Abdul El-Sayed at 54% to Haley Stevens 39%.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the culmination of an extraordinary year in Democratic primaries. I mean, I've been covering politics since the early 1980s, and I can't recall a year when I've written so many stories about Democratic primaries, or for that matter, Republican primaries. We have seen a kind of systematic series of conflicts between left and center in House races, some Senate races, and this is really the kind of the main event. I mean, both sides are kind of treating this as, to use the World War II analogy, a battle of the bulge. I mean, enormous effort on the kind of the party establishment, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, the governor, Gretchen Whitmer, Gary Peters, the outgoing senator that they're hoping to replace. They've all endorsed Haley Stevens. And then kind of the constellation of leftist luminaries have aligned behind El-Sayed, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, AOC, the Squad. So it is very clear on that. I think, the ideological dimension is important, but in many ways, I think it is a reflection of the depth of alienation of rank and file Democratic voters from the party establishment above all. I mean, you can't overstate how completely the final months of the Biden presidency and the inability to stop Trump from returning and the inability to slow him down once he did has discredited Democratic leadership with Democratic voters. And so their warnings about electability in El-Sayed's case, which may be very well justified, I think are largely falling on deaf ears.
Nancy, I want to ask you about an article Bloomberg published this week centering on black voters in the state of Michigan. And this is a pool, I gather, of about a quarter of voters. Black voters will play a crucial role here in this primary. And Haley Stevens has the backing of the Congressional Black Caucus, of the Michigan Democratic Party Black Caucus as well. How hard fought is this demographic here in this race?
I think it's a key voting demographic. I think it's all sort of a key moral demographic. A lot of progressive politics center around economic justice. And if progressive candidates, as we have seen, can sort of fail to connect with the Black community, it's a little bit of a challenge to continue to make that argument. So no, it's a very desirable voting bloc, both for loyalty and, again, for what it means about the causes that you're endorsing. So we'll see. I mean, I think that Representative Stevens has been polling a little bit better with Black voters, specifically in Detroit, where most Black voters are centered. We'll find out on Tuesday whether those efforts were successful or not. El Sayed's been here a lot trying to get those votes as well. It's going to be, I've been doing politics here for 26 years, and I generally feel like I have a sense of what's going to happen. And this is the first race in as long as I can remember that I'm really am not sure, and I'm very eager to see what happens.
Fair enough. And Ron, there's another group that's been very important in this debate, and that's there's been a lot of focus on Israel and support of AIPAC. Yeah. It's become a bit of a sticking point. We've got some sound we want to play you really quick.
Ask yourself why it is that we are paying $5 gas, why it is we can't seem to get out of this quagmire. It's because for too long, our foreign policy has been handed to us by the likes of the State of Israel and AIPAC, who has made sure that Democrats and Republicans are doing their bidding. I don't take that money.
What I will work for in the United States Senate, we need long-term peace. Donald Trump has failed us. The Prime Minister of Israel has failed in that regard.
So what do you do with this? I mean, is this an issue that voters are really making the decision based off of how important is this, given where this race is and the history of how people vote in the state, especially it was an issue in the presidential race and perhaps an outsized one that Democrats weren't expecting?
Yeah, look, I mean, in polling, there's no question that issues of affordability and standing up to Trump, are more Democrats cite that as major factors in their votes than Israel-Palestine. But I think it's become, here and elsewhere, a symbol, particularly the AIPAC support of kind of whether you are kind of going along with the way Democrats have traditionally done things, or whether you're someone who is going to push for new directions. And I think that is above all what we're seeing among Democratic voters here. Not to understate how completely support for Israel has crumbled in the U.S. I mean, in Gallup polling, the share of Americans expressing a favorable view toward Israel is close to 30 points lower than it was 5 years ago. I mean, that's comparable to what we saw for Russia around the invasion of Crimea. And it's not, it's not confined to Democrats, although it's most extreme among Democrats. You're seeing it among Republicans too. I mean, there is no question that what we are watching here is a significant backlash against the way Israel behaved and the way its defenders in the U.S. Have behaved. And I think Stevens aligning so closely with AIPAC, if she loses this race, I think that is a signal to Democratic voters that they have to have at least a more skeptical. It doesn't mean you have to, oppose Israel or view the security relationship as fundamentally a negative for the U.S., but kind of that unmitigated, unqualified support, I think is extremely problematic in a Democratic primary at this point.
Nancy, I've got a two-part question for you. The first is, tell us a bit about Mike Rogers, the former congressman against whom the winner is going to have to run. And the second is, we see Ron Brownstein not in front of his amazing bookshelves in Los Angeles. He's in Detroit. He's on a reporting trip there. What's one thing he needs to know, or something he should check out while he's on that reporting trip to get a holistic sense of the state of this race?
Okay, so Mike Rogers, he was a U.S. rep for a while in the aughts. He is a longtime Michigan politician. He's an extremely conservative Republican. He has said that he wants to roll back key provisions of the Affordable Care Act. He wants people to pay for preventative care. He has suggested that sick people should pay more for insurance, which again are kind of key things that the Affordable Care Act tried to resolve. He's a career law enforcement agent. He was in the FBI. He endorsed Trump for the first time after January 6th, which is an interesting choice for a law enforcement person. And in an editorial board endorsement review with the Free Press in 2024, he was a lot more MAGA-oriented than he had been, in his previous iteration as a Republican candidate. He suggested that people who were incarcerated should not be released from prison if they were illiterate until they had learned to read, which is a pretty dramatic statement. And so the biggest thing about Mike Rogers is that Michigan Democrats are really tearing themselves up right now over this primary, but every Michigan Democrat aligns far more with Haley Stevens or Abdul Sayed than they do with Mike Rogers. And it's going to be fascinating to see if the party, whoever wins this primary, can become a coalition, because Michigan is a purple state and it's going to take a full Democratic coalition. Every Democrat falling in line, not necessarily falling in love, and getting out to vote in November. So that's what you need to know about Mike Rogers. And what do you need to know about
Very
Detroit?
quickly,
We've got about 10 seconds left. So
I normally tell people to go get tacos in Mexican Town, but I'm not sure that's.
I think that's good enough.
Nancy Kaffer, she's with Detroit Free Press, and Ron Brownstein, of course, a Bloomberg opinion political columnist. Thank you both so much. Get some tacos for us.
And it was great to catch up with Ron. Talked with Nancy Cook as well. You can find on the latest edition of the Big Take podcast. That's available for download. Now, coming up here, we're going to talk about changes to Washington, D.C. and Dulles Airport in particular. Stay with us.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Nathan Hager, updating you on today's top stories. Ukraine struck a Rosneft oil refinery in Russia's Saratov region overnight. That's as a near daily series of attacks on Moscow's fuel industry continues. Officials say Ukraine also struck an airfield more than 600 miles east of Kiev, which Ukrainian officials say had been used to launch cruise missile strikes. Russian authorities say 2 people were killed in today's attack. Europe's wildfire crisis is spreading east. Greece has ordered fresh evacuations around Athens as gale-force winds drive the flames deeper into the western Attica region. And France continues to guard a massive fire that's grown to 4 times the size of Paris. Now, that blaze is contained, but thousands are still displaced and more than 100,000 acres are still burning. Hungary is shutting down its only nuclear plant. This is due to a record low levels of the Danube River. The country's new prime minister says a shortage of water to cool the PAX facility has it operating at just over a tenth of its 2,000 megawatt capacity. This is the first time this plant has been shut down in its 44-year history. And Michigan has joined Minnesota in announcing cyber attacks on its water supply. State officials say 9 of Michigan's water systems were the target of attacks that intelligence officials have blamed on Iran. Earlier this week, Minnesota reported at least 30 of its systems were hacked as well. Michigan says all of its water facilities, though, are operating safely as the investigation continues. David and Christina.
Thank you very much. Be interested to watch this as it goes forward. I mean, I think there's been a lot of fear about Iranian cyber attacks in light of the war starting in February. Seems like this may be a manifestation of that.
And a lot of criticism overall that the cyber infrastructure and security of those facilities is not great to begin with. So definitely
a lot of warning signs here. Nathan, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Speaking of infrastructure, Dulles International Airport outside of Washington, D.C. is going to get a long overdue renovation, according to President Trump.
It's considered one of the worst airports anywhere in the world. We're going to make it maybe the best with some hard work and some good thought process.
The Department of Transportation estimates it's going to cost more than $20 billion, that's with a B, dollars.
Our friend Kristen Capps, Bloomberg CityLab, has been looking at the president's efforts to reshape the nation's capital. The president's saying this is going to be the best airport. What's he proposing to do to make it the best airport?
Well, they really kind of want to start from scratch. United Airlines has had this plan going for a while to really take Dulles and correct all the mistakes that have been there since the original 1962 design, rebuild all the concourses, build a new train underneath, get rid of those wonderful people movers, and build something new.
Okay, so for people who don't know, the people movers are these crazy buses that when they started, they were supposed to be kind of chic. They're supposed to be like a mobile lounge, swinging 60s, cocktail lounge. Now they're like a bus that goes up on these weird stilts to the gate, drives you, and then, but they're strange. And when people aren't used to them, I know I had a friend land there a couple months ago and she's like, I'm on a bus. Wait, what is the bus doing? The bus is going up in the air. And they take forever because if you get off a flight, you then have to wait for everybody to load this bus because you can't get on a train. How do you feel about the people movers? People love or hate them?
I find them dystopian.
I want one. Yeah, it's.
I mean, you may be able to get one.
Yeah, you may be able to get one. Yeah, when you get off an international flight and you're like tired and you have to go get your baggage, it's just like this one extra step. And it's really, really exhausting. And I think that's really where it comes from. The original design was to actually keep people from walking, to like spare them that inconvenience by not having gates at all. I see. You would just go from the terminal.
Go right to the plane, right?
Yeah, directly onto the plane. Well, that didn't work out. Okay. And it was a costly decision, and they've had to do all these temporary concourses over years, and they've kind of stitched together an airport where they didn't originally have one. And now United Airlines and the Airport Authority want to fix it, and they've got President Donald Trump on board.
I find this airport to be inconvenient, far outside the city, but I do appreciate the Saarinen entryway, this beautiful architectural piece. Is Trump going to ruin that, or is that going to remain in this redesign?
It remains to be seen.
Oh, no.
Trump has said that he really liked it. That's the one thing he liked about Dulles. That's the one thing everyone
It is cool.
likes.
It's a very nice image when it's yeah.
But the renderings that we've seen, and we really don't know who's responsible for them, but what has been shared shows like a topper on top of it, a kind of curving glass addition. And to me, that's like adding to the Nike swoosh. You can't really keep...
Don't mess with it.
Don't mess with it.
Yeah, it's behind you there. And I asked you when you sat down, I said, are they keeping it or are they kind of covering it? It's almost like they're covering it. And also, why Dulles? There's a lot of airports around the country. Does this justify the amount of traffic at Dulles? Does it justify this kind of a revamp?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Dulles is the mighty number 22 airport in the nation, and now it's going to be the best, if not in this country, then in, possibly in the world. It's not a place where people transfer through. It's not a hub. Something like 70% of flights are into or out of Dulles. It's the final origin destination.
I thought it was a hub. Okay.
So it's not going to be like Qatar or, Seoul, these like extremely fancy
Singapore,
transportation hubs, but it is going to cost as much as that.
Well, on that point, who's going to pay for this? $20 billion. I'm going to guess it's going to go more than that. It's going to be more expensive than that. How is the financing of this going to work?
It's passengers who are going to pay every time you fly in and out of. At current traffic levels, it would add, on average, $90 to a ticket.
$90 to a ticket.
That's right. And for DC residents like myself, who will always pick DCA anytime we get a chance, it's going to be one more reason to try to avoid Dulles. But United Airlines does not see it that way. And, their passenger levels, their traffic has been increasing year over year. They've had their best 2 years ever in a row at Dulles. So they think they can keep this record going. But they have to really keep and surpass it to really make this cost measure out.
That's interesting to me because when you're booking flights, if you live in the D.C. area, a lot of times DCA, Reagan, is more expensive. But when you factor in the fact that it's 40 minutes in an Uber or on a train, or it's $70 each way, and it kind of, so if you're going to add another cost on top of that, one of the only reasons I ever flew out of there is because it was cheaper.
Yeah, I'm flying through National.
There we go.
You mentioned United. They have their Polaris lounge, and this was something we heard from the president as well. This is a big part, United kind of embracing this new level of luxury travel. What's that going to look like in this airport?
It should be extremely fancy, and this is United's opportunity to do that. Think about the other big United airports. They can't do this, for example, in Chicago, where they're sharing that airport with American Airlines. Dulles not only has, they have the traffic share at Dulles, but Dulles has the space. They can build out at Dulles, and they mean to make a luxury experience. So, maybe we can have a cocktail at Dulles finally, the way they planned it from 1962.
Gaze out at the data centers, surrounding landscape.
That's right. It seems like this is a United plan. This benefits United more than almost anybody else.
It's really incredible. Usually an airport plan like this would take years, if not decades, just to go through the legal approvals. You're talking engineering, design, environmental, and they would phase it out, not just to go through this legal process, but also to mitigate risk. But United has seen, under CEO Scott Kirby, a real opportunity in President Donald Trump, because Trump does not go through those legal approvals when he does planning projects. And by enlisting the president in this mission, you've got pre-approval that could cover, who knows how much bureaucratic red tape.
Is he like a modern-day L'Enfant when you think about what Trump's trying to do here? Is there any cohesive plan for what he wants to do with DC as we think about what's happening with the mall and the reflecting pool and all of these memorials and monuments, the helipad? Is there a cohesive Trump vision for what he wants the greater Washington area to look like and be?
I have not heard any Washingtonian describe him as a modern-day L'Enfant. I'm going
trademark it right here. Bring it
float
back.
that around and see what my neighbors say.
Get back to us. See how folks feel about that. Make sure to give them David's email. Yeah.
It appears to involve a lot of gold. There's a lot more gold than we had before in Washington.
I don't think you liked my modern-day L'Enfant.
If you're listening to us on the radio or watching us on TV, please tweet David Gura and let him know how you feel about his modern-day L'Enfant.
Just scheming, thinking about the way he sees the place.
We've got Nathan Hager here. Nathan, do you have any strong feelings about Dulles Airport or airports? You got a favorite?
I will sum it up to you in one way. I took the train here.
Okay.
David flies. I'm a trainer.
Yeah, I can't
like those points. BWI? How about BWI?
It's a little closer.
Oh, a little closer.
No, we're taking the train. DCA
it is, or the
All
train.
right, well, there's another fight we're about to dig
All right,
into.
we talked earlier about the digital divide over AI. There's also a stark divide over fashion in the workplace. Should you wear shorts in the office? It's going to be fractious. It's coming up next on Bloomberg This Weekend.
I want to start by saying the story is allegedly a data-based analysis because as we zoom out here, it seems like this is based on something else. And I am now surrounded by legs. We've got David Gura and our friend Chris Rouser is here. Boys, you're showing a lot of leg. Is this office appropriate?
Showing a lot of leg. This piece we're going to talk about by Chris has caused more than a minor tempest in office towers across New York City and indeed in commercial capitals around the world. He not proposing that shorts be allowed in the workplace, but investigating whether or not there's an appetite for it. And Chris, to Christina's point, you did this in a very data-driven way. You conducted a survey. Is now the time?
You didn't just
in the
take the
dog
legs
days
out
of
and
summer.
just say how you feel about it. There are facts here.
We had the Bloomberg Terminal people survey using one of their market pulse surveys, analysts and terminal subscribers, and 45% of people,
45%,
not a majority, said that it was suitable to wear shorts to work. Now, some of these people responded and said, of course it's okay if you work at a surf shop. You know, people really do not support wearing shorts to work. However, I believe it's time.
You believe it's time. You're going to take that position. I work near you physically in the office. Yeah. You often do wear shorts in the summer. You've been taking this stand for a while.
I have.
Before you put pen to paper. I want you to go back to when you first did it. Were you apprehensive about it? What did you think the reaction was going to be?
Yeah, well, like a lot of people I talked to for this piece, I had at one point or another in my career been scolded for not being dressed up enough for work. And that's a real thing.
Like, I mean, this is a guy who wears monogram shirts to work, Christina. So be clear about that.
I find him very fancy.
Okay.
He had some very chic linen pants on last time he was here.
But there are times, when you're not dressed appropriately for a situation, if you're meeting with people or whatever. But if you're just going to work, you're just going to be a desk jockey for the day. My personal rule is that if it's over 90 degrees, you should be allowed to wear Fahrenheit, about 32 Celsius. You should be allowed to
wear,
for our
listeners, another
shorts. Now, one of the first times I did in this office, I was walking through the newsroom, and the deputy editor-in-chief of Bloomberg News yelled across the room.
Hello, Redo Grigori. We say good morning to you.
Yes, good morning. He said, "What, are you going to the beach?" And this is a scary Swiss man.
Yeah.
He's lovely, but very intense.
At first blush, yes.
So I thought, okay, this is maybe not super accepted, but I powered through.
Yeah.
And now I think it's a topic of conversation all over New York City.
I will say, since I knew we were doing this piece,
you didn't wear shorts.
I did forget my shorts. I'm sorry. I just came back from vacation. I did forget my shorts, ironically. But as I was looking around today on a Friday in the summer, there were quite a few pair of work shorts. Now, I've never done summer shorts, but I do have like the really long Bermudas that kind of go with the matching jacket.
Do we call those culottes?
Culotte adjacent.
Yes.
Clam diggers.
And I've done winter shorts because you can wear them with tights. Because for me, the controversy here, especially on the women's end, is what length of short is workplace appropriate? Because we have varying hemlines on you two.
We wanted to show a little leg. Yes. Yeah.
No, but I mean, is there a thigh threshold for work appropriateness? Did you ask people about the length and kind of shorts?
People, the thing is, you think the longer, like the more appropriate. But if you get shorts that are kind of below the knee, that's also a different look. That can be like feel less tidy. So my feeling is like a 7 to 9 inch inseam. Anything shorter than that, usually my husband tells me what is appropriate for work. And one day he wasn't home, he was traveling, and I went to work and I immediately walked in the office and I was like, these are too short.
These are too short.
Because
Okay.
I made a mistake.
You dig into the history here. Look, during Revolutionary War times, the men in power were wearing, I guess not shorts, but
breeches.
Here's the thing. We think that like we've been wearing suits and stuff to work forever, and that's simply not true.
No.
It used to be that wearing clothes that recognize that you live in the world and you have to use your body for work was very not fancy. Like if you were an aristocrat, you needed to wear clothes like corsets and tight things and things that showed that you didn't have a body or you could never possibly use your body for work.
You didn't have to do labor.
You didn't have to do it. Like proved that you didn't have to do labor. But even then, men showed their legs. People wore breeches and wore tights. At the signing of the Declaration of Independence, John Adams was wearing stockings and showed his calves. So like, you can do it.
Celebrate that 250th, Christina. Right here, right now. Can I ask you last? We have a minute left.
Can I go home?
Can't go home. you're paving this path. Are designers doing it as well? Are we seeing this like on the runways that now when it comes to men's fashion,
seeing it in women's
shorts are a
workwear
thing?
as well. There are suit short outfits more and more frequently that you can buy.
There were two main pegs for this story. One of which was in Tokyo, there's actually like a government mandate that municipal workers are allowed to wear shorts. And that has caused a big...
And short sleeves,
and has caused a lot of consternation. And then also on the runways at the menswear show in Milan and in Paris, there were a lot of shorts paired with blazers, suits, and jackets. So like, Tom Ford, Louis Vuitton,
But Tom
Ralph
Brown has been
Lauren.
doing this forever too, like the short suits.
I meant Tom Brown. Yeah, Tom Brown has always been doing it. Saint Laurent sent down a look on the runway, which was basically like a guy in a blazer with no bottoms. Okay. And that is like a nightmare that a lot of us have actually had,
So,
and what it feels like to show up to work.
Summer of 27, maybe. Maybe not here. Chris, thank you very much. Congrats on the controversy.
Thank you.
Thank you for breaking down borders and raising hemlines here in the office. We appreciate it. There's so many calves.
I've got my pants back on.
So many
message
calves.
received. How did you do that? It's amazing. Little trick of the eye. I'm Nathan. I wake up with you on the radio. I assume that when you're in the DC bureau, there aren't many people. Are you wearing shorts?
We are always dressed to the nines.
Always dressed to the nines.
I don't think that's true. Nathan and I did a very early 4 a.m. Venezuela breaking news thing once, and I don't think you were wearing a suit.
No?
If they ever allow flip-flops in the office, I'm all about that.
A slider.
I want to say no shorts for men, but I also think it's like the equivalent of women not wearing sleeves, which is now acceptable and never used to be. If you have like a shift dress that's like sleeveless. So if you guys want to do some nice shorts, it's okay.
All right, well, that's great. We'll see how they feel about me doing that on the show on the regular. Probably not great.
Some board shorts in the office.
Yeah,
Stop
board
helping.
shorts.
Nathan, stop helping.
I love that.
Riding into the weekend.
Right.
Nathan, thank you for being here. Coming
Thank
up from
you for
DC.
having
Great to
me.
have you here
Lovely to
in
see
for
you.
Lisa
Great
Mateo.
work.
Thanks to all of you for joining us on Bloomberg this weekend. You can join our colleagues in Asia this evening when global markets kick off trading at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm David Gura.
I'm Christina Ruffini. We're here with Nathan Hager. Lisa is back next week, but we'll be back with you Saturday at 7 a.m. Eastern. The Michelle Hussein Show. That's next on Bloomberg Radio and TV.